them perhaps. And then there was a story this morning about a shift in the landscape with some of the competitors to the NYSE and the NASDAQ, and that would be Citadel and Virtu Financial, Morgan Stanley, which is the backers of Members Exchange. They actually won approval to go ahead and start trading stocks. Is there any implication for trading or the broader market from this move?
Well, there's implications to the extent that, the last several years have been all about what you would call market fragmentation. The idea that, rather than a bunch of orders going in one place, you have orders going to a number of places, a number of exchanges, most of them electronic. And when you think about the idea that you're going to get another exchange, you have to question how that's going to affect the degree of fragmentation. And one thing that's noteworthy, the New York Stock Exchange has what they call designated market makers. They oversee trading in individual stocks. And Citadel and Virtu, two of the companies that are going to get involved with this new members exchange, are also designated market makers on the NYSE. So, you have to wonder how that's going to play out in terms of the firm's really willingness to maintain their more traditional role. Of course, the tradition, it only goes back a few years that you've had designated market makers rather than the previous specialists on the NYSE. But how are they going to operate there relative to what they'll do on the members exchange? Are they just kind of hedging their bets, or what is it exactly that they're after? That'll be really the interesting sort of thing as this new market unfolds.
Well, Dave, how much, I'm dating myself because I was there when I started my career actually down on the exchange with some of the specialists, but what actually gets traded on the NYSE right now as opposed to, the other off-exchange markets?
Well, it's a relative handful of shares compared to what you used to see there. And that is, like I was saying, a function of the fragmentation of markets. So, you look at, let's consider today's trading, right? You've had 165 million shares change hands so far on the NYSE directly. If you look at trading in all, NASDAQ or NYSE listed stocks, it's over 2 billion. So that gives you some idea of, the loss of business on the NYSE as a result of the way that the markets have shifted. So the question becomes, if you bring in this whole new exchange and then you have firms with an incentive perhaps to trade there because they're among the owners, these are all kind of issues that people have to look at going forward in terms of how easy is it going to be to trade, how much is it going to cost, where does the business get done? There's a lot of implications here.
Yeah, Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much. Before we let you go, we do want to just bring you today's dad joke of the day. And this one is from Rob in Wisconsin, where I also happen to have a lot of family. Comes to me via Twitter. I had a dream last night that I was a muffler. I woke up exhausted. All right, and then I'll bring you another one. One more, twofer. Did you know that the first French fries weren't actually cooked in France?
Actually, I did. But go on.
They were cooked in Greece.
I was thinking about it, and I just didn't get to Greece, but that's perfect.
All right. I'll take it. I'll take
2 thumbs up for those two today.
We've got a new rating score. That would be the dad joke of the day. If you want to issue yours, you can send it to me at labramowitz@bloomberg.net or at Lisa Abramowitz1. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much for being with us. Right now, about 40 minutes into the trading day, we're near session highs as a little bit of optimism bleeds through. The NASDAQ now up 1.85%. Dollar strengthening versus the euro. Yields basically flat. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with world and national headlines.
Lisa, more states are laying out roadmaps to reopen. New York has a multi-phase approach planned, and California is going to let certain retailers offer curbside pickup by this Friday. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti says he is eager to get back to business.
We adopted swift measures. We've expanded testing to everybody, including asymptomatic people. We have some best, practices, not just in this country, but I think in the world.
But the latest model from the University of Washington projects a coronavirus death toll in this country near 135,000 by mid-August. That is prompting a warning from Dr. Anthony Fauci of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
You're inviting rebound, and rebound is going to give you spikes and spikes are going to give you the kinds of numbers. I don't know if those numbers, because I have skepticism about models, about they're only as good as the assumptions you put into them, but they're not completely misleading. They're telling you something that's a reality.
President Trump reopens his travel schedule in a big way this afternoon. He's going to visit a Honeywell factory in Phoenix that's making N95 masks. It'll be his first time outside the greater Washington region in about 2 months. The president's pick to lead the nation's spy agency says he wants to know China's role in spreading the coronavirus. Congressman John Ratcliffe is facing a confirmation hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee right now. He says if confirmed, he will deliver accurate and objective intelligence and speak truth to power. Democrats are questioning Ratcliffe's independence. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
Why can't you just go to some remote island and wait till all this is over?
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Because it's your job.
What do you think some of the structural changes might result?
Fortunately, it's our job too.
How's the value done in this market?
Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
It's very hard to make a forecast.
Bloomberg Markets.
This could be a lower for longer type of hit.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council. The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at Bloomberg.com/professional.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the Coronavirus Job Retention and Self-Employment Income Support Schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
When next in Asda, why not try our new mobile Scan and Go app? Simply download the app, scan your shop with your mobile, and pack as you go. Then head to the self-checkout to pay. Quick, easy, and contact-free, so you have more time to get your cook on. Asda. Mobile data charges may apply. Suitable for iOS 9 and Android 5 or above. Selected stores subject to availability.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P is in the green as investors look at the latest earnings coming through. That includes a beat from chemical maker DuPont. Every sector is up as the stocks Europe 600 advanced after slumping yesterday and missing out on that late rebound for U.S. stocks. Energy shares lead the rally amid a recovery in crude, with Total among the big winners, even after reporting a 35% plunge in first quarter profit. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P 500's up 1.5%, up 43. The Dow's up 1.4%, up 336. NASDAQ's up 1.6%, up 140. The 10-year is down 8/30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 18.1% at $24.08 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 0.5% at $17.0460 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.60. The euro's $1.866, and the British pound $1.2450. Norwegian Cruise Lines is seeking to raise as much as $2 billion in broad financing package that will boost its liquidity and help it weather a travel industry shutdown. Cruise line operators tapping investors for the sale of $600 million of junk bonds. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We're going to take a look at debt markets focused on fixed income, brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. Yesterday, the U.S. Treasury Department unveiled a $3 trillion net issuance plan for the second quarter, and they looked at a total year-end increase of Treasury issuance at $4.5 trillion. That is more than triple where we were last year. This is according to the fiscal year statistics through September 30th. Joining us now, Ira Jersey, U.S. interest rate chief strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. And I just want to get your sense, Ira, is this basically in line with what people were expecting in terms of the U.S. Treasury issuance?
Yeah, I think it's pretty close on the two-quarter basis. So, we had a little bit less for the second quarter and a little bit more in the third quarter than what the Treasury announced, but more or less in line. Basically, what they're saying is they're front-loading a lot of this fiscal stimulus and a lot of this debt now. And maybe part of that is just because, from our perspective, we had underestimated how quickly they were going to be making a lot of these payments. Because remember, the Treasury Department, in order to make payments for the announced stimulus plans already, they have to get the money into their bank account to do that. So they're doing that really fast. They're issuing a ton of T-bills. This really means there's not going to be there is an end in sight, but T-bills are going to grow just as quickly this month as they did last month. And that's one of the things I think that might have surprised some people.
So, Ira, as we slowly reopen the economy, are we going to see the Treasury yield curve steepen noticeably, materially?
Yeah, I think it will. It is today, and I think one of the reasons for that is not only will expectations maybe of future growth be a little bit better, but importantly, and I think that this is something that a lot of people have been worried about, is we have to make room for additional supply. So tomorrow morning, the Treasury Department is going to announce their refunding statement. So like Lisa mentioned, they've announced how much they're going to issue. Tomorrow, they're going to tell us exactly how they're going to issue it. So what bonds and what other securities they're going to issue in order to meet that $3 trillion goal. And one of those is going to be a new 20-year bond that they're going to issue tomorrow. They're probably going to increase the sizes of everything else. And as they do that, it's hard to really like 30-year debt and even 10-year debt where yields currently are, because if you buy right now a 10-year bond at 65 basis points, if it goes to 72 basis points, you start losing money, and it's very easy for it to go to 72 basis points at this point. There's not a big margin for error if you're an investor in the long end of the Treasury market right now.
There's an irony kind of baked into the Treasury market right now also. This is supposedly the most liquid and deepest debt market in the world. And yet I'm hearing reports yet again of a lack of liquidity, especially as the Fed hoovers up a lot of these securities with a greater amount of net purchases even than the Treasury's issuance so far. I'm just wondering what you're seeing on that side of things as far as liquidity.
Well, liquidity still is not where it was, say, in February, but it's significantly better than it was in March. So, just looking at the screens right now, back in mid-March, you couldn't do more than $10 or $15 million of 10-year notes on the wire, which means, basically, right now, click a button and be able to do it within one tick. Now, right now, I'm looking at the screen, it's about 110 million. So, and that's, a little bit better than it was certainly in March, a lot better. So it's better, but still not great. The long end in particular is still pretty illiquid. Now, I think that's one of the reasons why the Fed has been reducing its purchases. So the Federal Reserve, remember, had been buying $25 billion a day. Now they're only buying $8 billion a day. And I think in the next couple of weeks, they'll probably reduce that to $5 billion and then maybe keep it there for a little while until they see how both liquidity goes, but also how demand for this higher amount of supply turns out over the next 2 months as the Treasury Department increases the amount that it's issuing.
So, Ira, just lastly, Friday we're going to get some historic employment data, unemployment rate. I guess the consensus on the Bloomberg terminal is about 16% here. How do you think the Fed's going to really look at this data?
I think the Fed has anticipated it. I mean, we knew, a couple of weeks ago when we started to get all of the, super high jobless claims numbers that we were going to get a very bad print for April. So I think that if we get that 15, 16-ish%, no one's going to really blink an eye. If you see a 20%, then maybe the Fed will say, well, maybe this is a little bit worse. But a lot of this economic pain is really going to be front loaded and right now. So at some point we'll hit a steady state of that. And the question is, can the Fed's forecast, be close to reasonable in the idea that, well, we're going to have, 20-21% unemployment rate that will hit in June, and then we'll kind of stay there for a couple of months until the economy starts to reopen slowly. And, it's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone. And we'll keep the Fed on edge, but they also have done a lot already, and a lot of their programs are only getting going now, like the corporate buying the program, for example.
Ira Jersey, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. As always, Ira Jersey, Chief U.S. Interest Rate Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, giving us his thoughts on the Treasury market and the issuance of Treasuries, as well as the Treasury coming in and buying securities as well. And we'll take a look at that jobs data coming up Friday. It's just going to be historic. It's real people, real lives, real jobs. Over 30 million jobs have been lost in the last 6 weeks. So we'll obviously bring all of that to you on Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Investor sentiment is being helped by expectations that more economies will move toward easing lockdowns. The Dow soaring more than 325 points. After the bell, Disney reports earnings results. Parks have been hit hardest. Blockbusters have been pushed back, and ESPN is reeling. More cuts on the way at United Airlines. The carrier will cut at least 30% of its managerial and administrative jobs in October. That's about 3,500 positions, plus managers and other administrative workers must take off 20 days without pay by the end of September. The list of business failures blamed on the coronavirus continues to grow. Gold's Gym has filed for Chapter 11, saying the closing of its gyms due to the pandemic left it unable to make debt payments. And for the first time ever, sales of pickup trucks have beaten cars in the U.S. Last month, pickups outsold cars by more than 17,000 units. Truck sales in April were boosted by 0% financing offers. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
When next in Asda, why not try our new mobile Scan and Go app? Simply download the app, scan your shop with your mobile, and pack as you go. Then head to the self-checkout to pay. Quick, easy, and contact-free, so you have more time to get your cook on. Asda. Mobile data charges may apply. Suitable for iOS 9 and Android 5 or above. Selected stores subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be vigilant for suspicious calls that appear to be from your bank, the police, or the government. Remember, neither Santander, the police, or any other organisation will ask you to move or withdraw money for security reasons.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas.
But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the DREAM team. By using the DREAM Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the DREAM team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. Would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
on the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, as a growing number of companies file for bankruptcy with Hertz and with Neiman Marcus on the block at this point, we're going to take a look at the potential implications. Peter Orszag sat down with Bloomberg Television earlier today and talked, and we're going to hear what he had to say. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, stocks are rallying, and it's not just us, it's everywhere in the world. More countries are relaxing restrictions on businesses, raising hopes for recovery from the historic plunge sweeping the global economy. Hopes that reopening economies will eventually lead to a pickup in demand has also helped oil prices rally further. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is up 1.4%, up 40. The Dow is up 1.3%, up 320. And the Nasdaq's up 1.6%, up 141. The 10-year is currently down 8/30 seconds with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up nearly 17% at $23.82 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 0.4% at $17.05.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 106.62. The euro is $1.0859, and the British pound $1.2445. Some of the biggest names in U.S. stock trading just got the green light to open their very own exchange, Members Exchange, backed by equities heavyweights including Citadel Securities, Virtue Financial, and Morgan Stanley have won approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission to open their own new venue. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
It's 10:33 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Shonali Bosick. She sat down earlier today with Bloomberg Opinion columnist Peter Orszag, who's head of Lazard's financial advisory practice and a former Obama administration budget chief, to talk about the potential for a cascade of bankruptcies resulting from the pandemic. Let's listen in.
Well, look, if unemployment remains elevated for an extended period of time, and especially if there is not additional rounds of government stimulus, we are at some significant risk of cascading bankruptcies, where a bankruptcy at one firm then infects another firm, and then that infects a third firm, and so on and so forth. And that can do a lot of damage to the economy.
That was Peter Orszag, head of Lazard's financial advisory practice. Shonali Bosick, Bloomberg Wall Street correspondent, joins us now. So, Shonali, there is really a risk here. We're starting to see more and more stories crossing the tape here. So as you talk to your contacts, including Mr. Orszag. I mean, I guess they're just kind of preparing for what is probably a lot more to come.
That's for sure. And what Peter had said this morning was that he could see a potential cascade of bankruptcies where issues with one company can lead to an issue with another company to another company. He's also has written earlier this year that supply chains are being very heavily impacted by this coronavirus, which could lead to a big consolidation of these supply chains. And I see a lot of banks right now dealing with supply chain financing and issues that are interconnected with these firms. And so these are not just standalone issues, is what I'm saying. And this idea of cascading bankruptcies is quite scary.
Well, and I wanted to go a little bit further just in terms of what we've already seen. Hertz, for example, is teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. It got a stay from some of its creditors, but there's a concern that, for example, it will have to liquidate some of its inventories of cars in order to make good on its debt. That's leading to concerns about the valuations of cars, which goes to dealers. I mean, has anyone talked about the sort of interconnected nature in terms of a tipping point into some sort of critical moment? Is anyone talking about what that would look like?
So the thing that's hard about this critical moment, and Lisa, I'm really glad you brought up the value of cars and the value of homes and the value of all the things that are underlying in the economy that nobody wants to talk about yet. And the thing is, a lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full. They think it'll take a long time. And somebody like Orszag actually thinks that there will be intermittent closures continuing from now, and therefore much more stimulus needed in further rounds. So that idea of value of the things underlying our economy, nobody knows, but people are a little too exhausted with the current crisis to deal with what that might look like.
So it's interesting, Shonali, when you talk to Peter Orszag from Lazard, are they talking about ramping up some of their staffing and some of their restructuring departments, advisory departments?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned advisory because Lazard is also one of the biggest merger advisors in the world, and mergers are virtually nil. There's not a lot able to happen right now. The idea of hiring bankers for Lazard and a lot of its peers is a really tough one, but restructuring really is a place that's propped up right now and a place that they are seeing activity, but it's not enough activity to really offset the places that even a place like Lazard is losing revenue, which is those large-scale deals.
One thing that Peter Orszag was talking about was additional stimulus, and I'm wondering where and how they would like to see this deployed, given the fact that we've already seen a tremendous amount poured in through the PPP, through checks given to people around the country.
So speaking of checks, there's some really great graphics that we've had come out through Bloomberg News to show exactly where all of the money is going for this next wave of stimulus. Orszag in particular had mentioned that state and local governments are going to be a really important place to direct a lot of this aid. That has been a point of contention, as we know. We all remember what Mitch McConnell said. Even if the prospect of different local governments going bankrupt, that's something a lot of these restructuring artists really deal with as well. But paychecks into the hands of people faster seems to be the consensus, because if you don't have people spending in the economy, then you don't have an economy. Remember yesterday, Lisa, we had Jim Milstein tell us that he was worried that people will turn around and realize the investor class was saved first by all of the Federal Reserve's actions to save the credit markets, and that the investor class later may have to pay for it.
Shonali Bossack.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shonali.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time. Shonali Bossack is a Bloomberg Wall Street correspondent. That was a tremendous interview, really interesting, with Peter Orszag, who is head of Lazard's financial advisory practice. He's also a former Obama administration budget chief, as well as a Bloomberg opinion columnist, really raising the concern that a lot of people have, which is the longer this goes on and the higher unemployment rates go, the more we will see systematic bankruptcies that already are getting started, certainly in the retail sector and certainly in the travel sector. But I'm really struck so far. A lot of these companies were already over leveraged and were teetering on the brink of having some problems before this all happened, right? So we're not necessarily seeing the strongest of the bunch go under. There is just a question, though, at what point even the stronger companies will struggle as a growing number of companies fail to pay back their debts.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think what we've seen, Lisa, case is really for the last 4 or 5 weeks is companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets by drawing down on the revolving credit facilities, by taking down their additional bank loans, by tapping the credit markets, and in some cases even the equity and convertible bond markets to try to shore up their balance sheets, shore up their liquidity to try to ensure that they have enough cash on hand to weather this downturn. So we will see. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C.
No, actually, President Trump was speaking earlier, and we're getting those comments now. Let's take a listen.
So we'll find out. We just heard about it. But whatever it is, we'll let you know. But it has nothing to do with our government. Why would you let Fauci testify in the House? Because the House is a setup. The House is a bunch of Trump haters. They put every Trump hater on the committee, the same old stuff. They frankly want our situation to be unsuccessful, which means death. And our situation is going to be very successful. The House has put on a committee, an oversight committee of Maxine Waters and Maloney and the same people. And it's just a setup. But Dr. Fauci will be testifying in front of the Senate, and he looks forward to doing that. But the House, I will tell you, the House, they should be ashamed of themselves. And frankly, the Democrats should be ashamed because they don't want us to succeed. They want us to fail so they can win an election, which they're not going to win. But they want us, think of it, they do everything they can to make things as bad as possible. And right now, the stock market's way up. Everybody's excited. They're going back to work safely, but they're going back to work. We're opening up our country again. And this is what we're doing. And I'll tell you, the whole world is excited watching us because we're leading the world. And what happened should never, ever have happened. China should have informed us that they had a problem. Are you concerned at all by some of the recent Have you spoken to President Xi about your... I have not spoken to him. No, I have not spoken to him. I might, but I haven't spoken to President Xi. I have not. Yes, Jennifer? New York Times numbers about the virus increasing are wrong. What are your... Well, it's a report, and that's a report with no mitigation. So based on no mitigation, but we're doing a lot of mitigation. And frankly, when the people report back, they're going to be social distancing, and they're going to be washing their hands, and they're going to be doing the things that you're supposed to do. We won't be going into stadiums full bore yet, you know, for events and soccer and football and all of the different events. Baseball, I hope baseball can get going. But they won't be going in full bore yet. At some point, hopefully in the not too distant future. But that report is a no mitigation report, and we are mitigating. What is a definitive answer as to where the virus came from? Well, I think we do, but I'm going to, we'll be reporting on it over the next period of time, Steve. We'll be reporting. There'll be plenty of people ask me that question, and we will be reporting very definitively over a period of time. No, I don't have any. Everybody traveling has been tested. We have great testing. And literally, they've been tested over the last hour. And the test result comes back in 5 minutes. We have great testing. Or they wouldn't be allowed to travel with me. I mean, I would, it's not my choice. It's a very strong group of people that want to make sure they are tested, including Secret Service. So they're all tested. Everybody traveling on the plane. The only question I can't answer, has the press been tested? And I suspect maybe, has the press been tested? Steve, have you been tested? Well, I trust you. I trust you. Are you planning to wear a mask, sir? Say it? Are you planning to wear a mask, sir? I think it's a mask facility, right? Are you going to wear a mask? If it's a mask facility, I will, yeah. I don't know if it's a mask facility, but we're going to see Honeywell. They have done an incredible job on many fronts. And so I'm going to pay my respects to a great company and a great state, the state of Arizona. From certain other countries. No, like other people got sent from other countries. We're making massive numbers of masks. We're making our ventilators. We have the best testing anywhere in the world, not even close. Agree with me. But we have the greatest testing in the world, and we have the most testing in the world.
Many of the states that are beginning to reopen, they're not following your criteria in terms of having 2 weeks of reduced.
Well, the governors have, it's a fair question. The governors have, I have given them great discretion. I respect the governors, and I've given them great discretion. If, however, I see somebody doing something that's egregious or wrong, I will stop it in 2 seconds. Many of the governors have called me up and asked my opinion, but and really a lot of them have, and the relationship is very good. But, you know, the governors are given, like on a story like that, where they're going down and they're going down rapidly, but maybe it's short of the 14 days. They're given a certain amount of discretion. If I see something wrong, though, we will stop it.
President, on the IHME model, which is now showing 134,000 deaths by August, doubling its previous predictions, are you concerned that that's happening because some of these states are relaxing guidelines?
No, I'm not, because that assumes no mitigation. And we're going to have mitigation. No, we're letting people out. But the fact that we're letting people go and go to their jobs, they have to do it. You know, if they held people any longer with the shutdowns, and you're going to lose people that way too, and you already have, I'm sure. But between drug abuse and, I mean, they say suicide, a lot of different things. There's no win, just so you know. There's no great win one way or the other, but I'll tell you where there is a win. We're going to build a country. I did it once. 2 months ago, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world, the best employment numbers we've ever had in history, right? I mean, everybody agrees. Even CNN agrees with that one. But I will say this, we're going to do it again, and that's what we're starting. And I view these last couple of days as the beginning. We're going to build the greatest economy in the world again, and it's going to happen pretty fast. Well, that's with no mitigation. We're doing mitigation. We have a lot of mitigation. The fact that they're out, they're mitigating, they're social distancing, they all know that. They're washing their hands a lot. But we have to get our country open. We have to open our country. So you have all reports. Look, models have been very inaccurate. I've seen models that are very inaccurate. But you know, one model that's very important is that if we did this a different way, we would have lost more, much more than 2 million people. And we did it the right way. We did everything right. But now it's time to go back to work. So I'm going to Arizona. I will see you there. Thank you. Thank you.
We've been listening to President Trump at the White House as he departs for Arizona, talking about a range of issues, saying that he would like China to be transparent on the virus, saying virus models have been very inaccurate and that they account for the U.S. doing nothing, talking about the testing and a host of other issues. Right now, in the markets, we're seeing a sustained rally as people do expect the U.S. to start its reopening process, although off earlier highs. The NASDAQ up 1.7%. The S&P up 1.5%. Amid a backdrop, and I will say, Paul, this has been one theme of really steady yields. You see this both on the Treasury side as well as the corporate debt side, as a growing number of investors factor in Fed stimulus and bond purchases. And weighing in on that is somebody who has an intimate knowledge of the Federal Reserve, and that would be Eric Stein. And I'm really glad that we have him, co-director of Global Income at Eaton Vance Management, because I want to put into perspective the financing plans that the U.S. Treasury Department has. Eric Stein, we are experiencing a $3 trillion expected issuance in the second quarter by the U.S. Treasury Department. How much will this cause yields to go up, given the dynamic that we're seeing in markets right now?
Well, first off, thanks certainly for having me on. $3 trillion, it is a huge number. It not only sounds huge, it is huge. But, the Fed has basically, to me, kind of underwritten, market functioning in the U.S. Treasury market and also underwritten a lot of supply. And so given that the Fed, has rates now effectively at zero, just a touch above zero, a lot of programs, you're mentioning some in the credit market, quantitative easing, so buying treasuries, and that helps absorb that supply. In addition, and despite the fact we've seen, markets rally really over the past, 5-6 weeks or so, there still is a lot of uncertainty out there in the world and fear and whatnot, and that also helps to keep treasury yields low. So it's not only the Fed, but the Fed certainly has a very big part in the stability, as you mentioned before, of U.S. Treasury yields.
So, Eric, you mentioned, we're kind of at that zero bound with interest rates. I'm looking at the 10-year here, trading at 0.66%. So looking at something like the 10-year, Do you think the Fed has any appetite for that part of the curve to be at or below 0%?
No. So it's interesting. It's a great question. That would be a negative or really inverted yield curve. So, it's a big debate that I have my colleagues at Eaton Vance Management. Does the shape of the yield curve matter? Personally, I'm squarely in the camp that yield curve shape does matter. It's a market signal. Yes, it can be manipulated by the Fed or others, but it is a market signal. And so I think having an inverted yield curve, which if short end rates were a touch above zero and the 10-year was negative, there'd be with the banking sector. I think there's issues from a market confidence perspective and whatnot. So I think the Fed likes very low treasury yields, but they also like a positively sloped yield curve.
How concerned are you about a lack of liquidity in the treasury market? I'm hearing that it's actually starting to worsen a little bit as the Federal Reserve has net purchases that exceed issuance so far. How big of an issue is that?
So it depends to me what type of less liquidity are you seeing. You've heard about for years, let's say in Japan, in the JGB market, where there's certain JGBs that don't trade in a particular day because the BOJ owns such a large portion of those. So I don't think we're not seeing that in the U.S. With the Treasury market and the Fed. And then, to me, we're certainly not back to what we were in mid-March when, the Treasury market, the on-the-run, off-the-run spreads, or the Treasury repo market, really, not only the backbone of the fixed income market, but I'd say the backbone of global financial markets is the U.S. Treasury and the Treasury repo market. That effectively wasn't functioning in mid-March. It's a lot better today. So certainly if you're active in one particular security and you're trying to trade that, having the Fed purchase more than the issuance supply can cause some issues, but I think we're far away from where we were in the middle of March.
So, Eric, where are you and the good folks at Eaton Vance kind of doing your work right now? Where are you seeing some value, some opportunities?
Yeah, so look, I think of Eaton Vance Management on the fixed income side. We're very much a credit shop, whether it's municipal credit, corporate credit, sovereign credit, securitized credit. And, on one hand, doing credit investing is challenging right now, given, we don't know, the economy is obviously quite weak now. There likely should be some opening up and some recovery, but the trajectory of that is very uncertain. The length of how long, whether or not we get a second wave of coronavirus and need to shut things down again, a lot of uncertainty. And so, I think that makes it challenging. At the same time, you have Fed backstop and Fed support, which I think is helpful to the credit market. So I think, certainly parts of the bank loan market and the high yield market that were, selling off a lot, loans somewhat in February and all those asset classes into the kind of middle or end of March, they certainly rebound a lot. But I think in the corporate credit markets, you see some value, still certainly there in loans, high yield, emerging markets that we focus on the global income team that I co-run, value there. But obviously emerging markets also have their own set of challenges, given the health outcomes in some of these countries. But even I think some of the worst fears from a couple of weeks ago, even in emerging markets, are a little less concerning than they were. There's still going to be challenges for sure.
We're speaking with Eric Stein, co-director of Global Income at Eaton Vance. And previously, you worked on the markets desk of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which was very much in focus. They are expected to start buying ETFs that own credit in the next few days and then follow that up with their program to actually buy initial issuance of corporate debt. Do you think the market's gotten ahead of itself in terms of its expectations for Fed purchases, given that it'll just be a fraction of the overall market?
Look, I think the Fed is the signaling effect is quite powerful, and so certainly the details of the programs matter. It's something that we're discussing at Eaton Vance, and constantly getting questions. When are the details going to be out, and when's the Fed going to announce this? You have to understand it takes the Fed some time to announce a lot of their programs, just given the nature of that institution, particularly new programs they're dusting off from 2008 are a little bit easier. But to me, the most important thing is that the Fed has shown that the programs will adapt, they will change, typically multiple times. And so, the Fed's goal is not to, get asset markets back to where they were before the coronavirus, but their goal is to keep credit flowing in the economy. And so to the extent that, if markets were to reverse significantly from here, to me, the Fed would very much adjust the programs and get markets continuing to function. So, while we might not see further gains when the Fed actually does some of these purchases, because I would agree a large amount is already priced in, I think sometimes investors need to separate both the signal from the actual purchases. And what we've seen really in central banking, not only the Fed, but think about the ECB, back to the last crisis, a lot of times, if anything, words can be more powerful than the actual actions, assuming that the market thinks that the central banks, in this case the Fed, are credible with those words.
Eric, earlier this morning, Lisa and I were talking about bankruptcies and the number that's starting to grow, and are we going to see a kind of a cascading wave of bankruptcies out there? What's your sense of credit quality out there as you kind of look across your portfolio? Where are some of the areas of concern?
Yeah, look, I certainly think, bankruptcies are going to go up from they were very low levels, for the most part in most corporate sectors, since the financial crisis of 07, 08, 09, other than some of the challenges in let's say the energy sector in 15 and 16, and obviously idiosyncratic bankruptcies here and there. So I think that, they're for sure going to go up. To me, the question is, how long does that last? And also, does it become more socially acceptable for more and more entities to default? I think if that were the case, that would be, problematic, for credit markets and for the economy writ large. If it's just the sectors that are, either had their issues kind of coming in to the coronavirus shock, such as the energy sector, for sure it's been exacerbated by the no one traveling, or sectors like, airlines or rental cars or whatnot, where it's, those are massively affected due to social distancing and quarantining that we're seeing. For sure, there's going to be bankruptcies, there's going to be credit events in those sectors. So I think we're going to see it. And if you go back in history, actually there are years sometimes you have better returns in credit markets in years when there are some bankruptcies, assuming it's priced into the market, even than years where there aren't bankruptcies. But for sure, it's going to be something to focus on.
Hey, Eric, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Eric Stein, co-director of Global Fixed Income at Eat Vance. They have about $518 billion under management, so they have a great view of the fixed income market there. They are based in Boston. And Lisa, it's interesting, I think the bankruptcy issue is clearly, as Eric was suggesting, is going to be a bigger issue, something that'll play out probably for the remainder of the year, if not longer. And creditors are really going to have to take a look at their portfolio here.
Honestly, what he said is if it becomes socially acceptable, that's going to be a problem. And I think that one question is how many companies currently filing for bankruptcy were looking for a way to pull down on their debt before this actually all came unraveled. Yeah, and now you can just say, hey, it's once in a lifetime, once in 100-year pandemic that kind of brought us to this point. So, again, we will pay attention to that, and Bloomberg News will bring us all the news as it develops. This is Bloomberg.
Sometimes this...
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of people you've met online who claim to be stranded abroad and urgently need money. Always take time to think before you act, and if you think you're the victim of fraud, then let your bank know right away.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Pauline. Love may be blind, but it has a new smell. Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £42 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments. I'll fight you. Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
DreamLab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Where's your views on the municipal bond landscape?
The market does not like uncertainty, does not react well to uncertainty.
There's a whole lot of optimism around the valuation of Uber.
What is Ford saying about the self-driving car?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Maybe we're getting hooked on debt and low interest rates.
The black hole called power could be a bigger black hole.
Only buy IPO stock that you can't get. If you can get it, it's probably a dog you don't want it.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we've been talking about bankruptcies and the growing number and the expectation for more bankruptcies. We're going to dig into that Hertz story as it prepares for bankruptcy. Plus, we're going to chat with David Kelly, Chief Global Strategist for JP Morgan Asset Management, on his current outlook for the markets. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, no matter where you look, stocks are higher. U.S. equities are following European stocks up. Sentiment is buoyed by more economies moving toward easing the lockdowns caused by the pandemic. Oil is headed for its longest winning streak in 9 months. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P's up 1.5%, up 44. And then Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 1.4%, up 340. And the Nasdaq's up 1.7%, up 149. The 10-year is down 730 seconds. The yield is 0.65%. West Texas Intermediate's up 15.1% at 23.48 a barrel, while COMEX Gold's down 0.6% at 17.0320 an ounce. The dollar yen 106.61. The euro's $1.841. The British pound $1.2455. Feliz Cinco de Mayo. Unless you happen to be in Mexico and you need a cerveza, Mexico's beer lovers have had a hard time finding stock shelves after the government deemed that industry non-essential and ordered it shut down. But Constellation Brands, the company that brews Modelo brands like Negro Modelo in Mexico and sells them in the U.S., is continuing its operations in the country amid the coronavirus pandemic. So I guess you may have to cross north into the U.S. if you want a beer for Cinco de Mayo. Happy times. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. Right now, let's take a look at small and mid-cap shares. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor, joining us. We are seeing a bit of bigger gains in that space. What are you looking at?
Yeah, just a bit, Lisa. The Russell 2000 index up 2.1%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 1.6%. So smaller companies are doing better in today's trading, at least. There's, the Russell's still down more than 22% for the year. That's twice as much as the S&P 500. So as far as today goes, the Russell's biggest gain by far belongs to Portola Pharmaceuticals, whose ticker is PTLA, the developer of treatments for blood disorders, 129% after agreeing to a $1.4 billion takeover by Alexion Pharmaceuticals. Akebia Therapeutics, ticker AKBA, has climbed more than 36%. The drug maker's proposed treatment for kidney disease had positive results in a final stage study, and Adverum Biotechnologies, ticker ADVM, has risen almost 36%. The drug developer released data on a potential treatment for an eye disease. Now, the steepest drop in the Russell belongs to Hertz Global Holdings, ticker HTZ. The rental car company has lost 17.5%. Hertz made a deal with lenders to buy time for debt restructuring. And Bloomin' Brands, ticker BLMN, has fallen more than 10%. Preliminary first quarter earnings at the owner of Outback Steakhouse trailed analyst average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. And on top of that, Bloomin' Brands is selling $200 million of notes to raise cash.
Bloomberg Stocks Editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. As Dave was just reporting, rental car company Hertz entering into some agreements with some of the lenders to try to buy some more time to stave off bankruptcy. To get the latest, we welcome Eliza Ronalds-Hannon. She's a high-yield and distressed credit reporter for Bloomberg News. Eliza, thanks so much for joining us. Give us the latest here on Hertz. How close is this company to filing for bankruptcy?
Well, it has negotiated just a 2.5-week forbearance. So, I mean, it's very close. There's always sort of that Hail Mary that they'll be able to, that any given company will be able to strike a deal with creditors at the last minute. to avoid Chapter 11, but, Hertz is very much already drawing up the documents, was prepared to file last night if it did not get the forbearance from creditors, but now it has 2.5 more weeks during which lenders have agreed not to foreclose on its assets, not to demand a liquidation of an enormous fleet of cars, for instance. But I think that it's still likely that this time will be used to hash out an agreement that will take place in bankruptcy, because at this point it's just really tough to imagine a company with this complex of a capital structure unwinding everything outside of court.
Eliza, can we take a step back and talk about the business model of the rental car companies right now? It's not just Hertz. Avis has also come under pressure, but Hertz is under more given their finances heading into this. About 2/3 of the business stems from air travel. You fly somewhere, you rent a car to get around. And I'm wondering, how much was this really an issue of the pandemic? And how much is this a Hertz-specific issue of them adding too much debt at a time of uncertainty given Uber and Lyft and just the changing backdrop there?
Right. It's a little bit of both, but I think this is really one of the first companies that we've seen that might file bankruptcy almost entirely because of the COVID pandemic fallout. I mean, Hertz has been levered up and somewhat struggling for a couple of years. I mean, it's been sort of on people's watch list, but its debt has traded at par. It has not been a distressed company in that sense. And it's brought in a lot of revenue. Despite all of its debt, it's been able to stay afloat. So unlike some of the companies we've seen go bankrupt in the past month or so, which really were fully distressed before COVID, and this really put them over the edge, Hertz would represent one of the first, or really the first company to end up in bankruptcy pretty explicitly because of the kind of just global shutdown that the COVID pandemic has caused. Like you said, it relies a whole lot on travel, and so it's one of a whole number of companies in the travel sector or adjacent to the travel sector that we're now seeing come under real hardship.
So, Eliza, has Hertz and some of the other rental companies, have they received fiscal stimulus from the federal government, or are they expecting it? Were they one of those industries that did benefit a little bit?
That's a good question. They have not received any sort of stimulus or bailout yet. They've been in communication with the Treasury Department. We really don't know too many details on that, but I think like any other company, they're very hopeful that any day now there could be some additional bailout or rescue financing that they would qualify for. But no, they have not gotten any sort of that assistance yet, and so that's kind of been make or break.
Eliza, there's a question as a growing number of companies file for bankruptcy. How much has already been priced into debt markets? In other words, are we seeing creditors getting crammed down and forced to swallow bigger losses than they were expected, or are they already budgeting for this?
That's a great question. It really depends on the company. So any of the companies that have already been distressed before the crisis, it has been priced in, and you see some really sophisticated hedge fund owners of the debt and lenders. So they've been low, and they actually are poised to make a lot of money in a down. So one of the reasons, one of the priorities for Hertz right now is trying to hold off on having to sell all its used car fleet during a period where, the cars would fetch really low fire sale prices.
Right. The House is a setup. The House is a bunch of Trump haters. They put every Trump hater on the committee, the same old stuff. They frankly want our situation to be unsuccessful.
The Senate Banking Committee takes up White House law.
My diploma. At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Instead, prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect.
Somebody has a stroke every 5 minutes in the UK. With time, though, courage, and the right support, lives can be rebuilt. Mine was. But with this current crisis, I can't imagine how much harder it must be for the...
Provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want...
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher's Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
Make sure you're never without something to listen to.
Under management, David, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start there. The wide range of outcomes. Can you give us your sort of optimistic case and your pessimistic case based on what we're seeing right now in the data?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to recognize that in the baseline, this disease is not going away. We have succeeded in stabilizing it. We have flattened the curve, but it's really just a plateau more than a curve. And so we're running at about 25,000 cases a day, running at between 1,500 and 2,000 more fatalities a day, and it'll probably keep doing that under a base case. Now, a good outcome would be a better treatment. We have seen some treatment options, one or two companies, certainly we've one approved for emergency use, but there are other treatments out there, and doctors are getting better in terms of protocols. If you can push that mortality rate down, then maybe people feel a little bit more comfortable about getting back to normal, and I think you may see that later on this year. On the other hand, a more negative outcome is one in which mortalities just refuse to go down significantly, and a vaccine is delayed. So you got to, we're talking about, maybe they'll get a vaccine by the end of the year, maybe it'll be distributed by the first quarter, but that's a lot. There's a lot of ifs. A lot of things have to go right there. And if we don't have a vaccine until late in 2021, and we can't and don't push down mortalities, then it's very hard for everybody to get back to normal. And so this could be rather than a V-shaped recession.
So, David, in your scenarios, I mean, do you factor in the fact that there might be a second wave,
vaccine, we will get out of this, and I do think that in the long run, U.S. stocks may do okay, but I think that people need to be prepared for a second correction, a second wave down in the market as people's more optimistic views on this virus sort of petering out go away. So I think that's the first thing. And beyond that, I think you've got to figure out, what's going to weather this recession well and what's going to thrive in the rebound. And then the last thing I'd say is international stocks are still getting cheaper and cheaper relative to U.S. stocks. And the one region of the world that is done in getting past is East Asia. And I do think people ought to take advantage of that and make sure they've got enough allocation to countries like Korea, Taiwan, Australia, and so forth in this pandemic.
David, are you one of those folks that is concerned that the financial markets, particularly the risk-on markets, are being artificially supported by what has been a very, very aggressive Federal Reserve and central banks globally?
Well, I think that has been a problem for a long time. I can't fault the central bank.
It has reached an 11th hour pact with lenders to give the struggling rental car company more time to rework its debt. The waivers will give the company until May 22nd to develop a financing strategy. And health insurer Humana will waive the costs its Medicare customers are normally expected to pick up behavioral health and telehealth visits through the end of the year. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You took the first step and quit smoking. Former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless...
...survivor and their family, more isolated and alone than ever. The Stroke Association is working tirelessly to support the NHS and develop new ways to rebuild lives. To find out more or to donate, search Stroke Association now.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher's Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4 28. And salmon fillets get a
225. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you so much. Paul Sweeney here with Lisa Abramowitz. Lisa, markets pretty strong here today. After a couple weak days, we had 3 days of declines. People concerned about maybe the scope and the shape of this economic recovery, but now we're getting some green back on that screen today.
Yeah, I think that people are excited that we're going to see sort of a bottoming out, or we have seen a bottoming out, and that perhaps we can start moving forward. Still a big question, though, given the fact that it's not impossible at all that we could get a resurgence of the virus in the fall. In fact, some scientists say that's more likely than not.
Right, exactly. Let's get our latest on kind of what's going on with the coronavirus. There's so many moving parts.
Max Neeson, thank you so much for being with us, as always. Bloomberg opinion columnist covering the biopharmaceutical space. Right now, let us head over to Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's doing his daily coronavirus briefing, where he's going to give a sense of where we are in this virus.
The number of total hospitalizations is 9,600. That is a lower number than yesterday, barely. It's basically flat. As I mentioned yesterday, the weekend reporting path we take coming down the mountain, how fast does that decline continue? Does the decline continue? And that is purely a function of what we do. None of this is preordained. None of this is decided by any factor other than our own behavior. You tell me how well New Yorkers socially comply with distancing, etc., and I'll tell you what that infection rate is doing. It's that simple. And everything we have done thus far has worked, and that's why the number's coming down. But you tell me what we do today and tomorrow, and I'll tell you the infection rate in the next few days. What we've said from the beginning is the key is testing and tracing and isolating. It's very hard to do. It's easy to say. No one has ever done this before. We've never put this kind of testing regimen in place. Industry-wide, we've never had a tracing operation that's anywhere near this magnitude. We've never done isolation. That's never happened before. But we do what we have to do, and this is what we have to do to monitor the infection rate and to control it. And that's what we're doing. We laid out a very specific reopening plan yesterday. We studied all the states' plans. We've studied reopening plans of countries around the world. We incorporated all the best practices. We want to get on with life. We want a paycheck. We want to make sure our job is there. But it's still a time to be smart, right? We don't act emotionally. We act based on logic and fact and science. That's how we make policy. But we have to remind ourselves every day, because the pressure is to just respond to the emotion. And there's also no doubt that we're going through a devastating and costly moment in history. It's costly on every level. Number of lives lost, the economic impact, the personal impact. Substance abuse has gone up, domestic violence has gone up, mental health issues have gone up. We paid a very high price for what we're going through. But the hope is that we learn from it and that we are the better for it, right? We endured the pain. Let's make sure we benefit from the gain. And this is also true, and people can understand this as a life lesson. You know, you get as old as I am, you go through some there before as a starting point. We want to replace, but we want to improve, and we want to be better for this experience, and we want to build back better. We were smart enough to do that as a country, as a state after 9/11. We went through pain. We came back stronger. You could argue more united as a country, more united as a state, more aware of our vulnerabilities. And yes, greatest country on the planet, greatest state in the nation, is our opinion. But we were vulnerable to terrorist attacks. Okay, so we learned from it. And we got stronger, and we got better, and we We've incorporated security into our life in a way that was unimaginable before 9/11. Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, devastated. We went through with the hospitals, what we went through with PPE, staff shortages. That can never happen again. How we use telemedicine, we have to learn and we have to grow. It was vital to what we did here. We have to make sure we're better at it. Our public transportation system, we're learning. Tonight we're going to shut down the subways for the first time in history. Why? Because they have to be disinfected. Who ever heard of disinfecting a subway car? In front of that classroom and teaches that class, and you do that all across the city, all across the state, all these buildings, all these physical classrooms. Why? With all the technology you have. And we've been exploring different alternatives with technology, right? We have classrooms in this state that have technology where they're talking to students on Long Island with a teacher from Staten Island, with students from around the world participating with technology. Hearing that one teacher. And if you look at the technology, it looks like all these different students are in one classroom. All right. Well, let's learn from that, and let's learn from this experience. We did a lot of remote learning. Frankly, we weren't prepared to do it. We didn't have advanced warning. But we did what we had to do, and the teachers and the education system did a great job. But there's more we can do. We're still working on providing some students with the technology, with the tablets, etc. Some teachers needed training and they weren't ready for it. Well, let's take this experience and really learn how we can do differently and better with our education system in terms of technology and virtual education, etc. And that's something we're actively working on through this process. So it's not about just reopening schools. When we are reopening schools, let's open a better school and let's open a smarter education system. And I want to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We'll be working with them on this project. Bill Gates is a visionary in many ways, and his ideas and thoughts on technology and education he's spoken about for years, but I think we now have a moment in history where we can actually incorporate and advance those ideas, right? When does change come to a society? Because we all talk about change and advancement, but really we like control, right? And we like the status quo, and it's hard to change the status quo. But you get moments in people say, okay, I'm ready for change. I get it. I think this is one of those moments. And I think education, as well as other topics, is a topic where people will say, look, I've been reflecting, I've been thinking, I learned a lot. We all learned a lot about how much we have to do. And let's start talking about really revolutionizing education. And it's about time. One point I want to make about reopening, not just in this state, but all across this nation. There's a conversation that is going on about reopening that we are not necessarily explicit about, but which is very important. There's a question that is being debated right under the surface, and the decisions we make on reopening are really profound decisions. And the fundamental question, which we're not articulating, is how much is a human life worth? How much do we think a human life is worth? There's a cost of staying closed, no doubt. Economic cost, personal cost. There's also a cost of reopening quickly. Either option has a cost. You stay closed, there's a cost. You reopen quickly, and there's a cost. The faster we reopen, the lower the economic cost, but the higher the human cost, because the more lives lost. That my friends, is the decision we are really making. What is that balance? What is that trade-off? Because it is very real. If you now look at the projection models of how many lives will be lost, you'll notice they changed recently. Why did they change? And they went up dramatically. Why? Because now they're factoring in the reopening plans and the reopening schedules that states are announcing. The federal government's estimate, FEMA, has increased from 25,000 to 200,000 the number of daily cases by June. Think about that increase. The IHME, which is a foundation model supported by Gates, which is the preferred model by the White House, when they were projecting deaths by August 4th, they projected in early April 60,000 deaths. They projected mid-April 60,300 deaths, actually a little lower. Their new projection is 134,000 deaths. How did it go from 60,000 deaths to 134,000 deaths? This is the model which the White House relies on. When the director of the Institute was asked why those revisions happened, the director said rising mobility in most U.S. states, as well as the easing of social distancing measures expected in 31 states by May 11th, indicating that growing contacts among people will promote transmission of the coronavirus. That's a very nice way of saying when you accelerate the reopening, you will have more people coming in contact with other people. You're relaxing social distancing. The more people in contact with other people, the higher the infection rate of the spread of the virus. The more people who get infected, the more people die. We know that. And that's why the projection models are going up. There's a cost of staying closed. There's also a cost of reopening quickly. That is the hard truth that we are all dealing with. And let's be honest about it. And let's be open about it. And let's not camouflage the actual terms of the discussion that we're having. And the question comes back to how much is a human life worth? You see that projection model go from 25 to 200,000 cases from FEMA. You see deaths go from 60,000 to 134,000. How much is a human life worth? That's the real discussion that no one is admitting openly or freely, but we should. To me, I say cost of a human life is priceless, period. Our reopening plan doesn't have a trade-off. Our reopening plan says you monitor the data, you monitor the transmission rate, you monitor the hospitalization rate, you monitor the death rate. If it goes up, you have a quote-unquote circuit breaker. You stop. You close the valve on reopening. But it is a conversation that we should have openly. Hard conversation, painful conversation, controversial conversation, yes, all of the above. But it's also the right conversation because those are the decisions we're making. Also, as we're going through this, it's important that our leadership be factual and productive and united, because this is a time when government has to work, and government on all levels has to work, and the federal government has to work, and it has to work now better than it has worked in the past. You know, all the craziness that we've watched in Washington, all the politics that we've seen in Washington, all the dysfunction that we've seen in Washington, now it is unacceptable. Because what government does today will literally determine how many people live and how many die. And that's not hyperbolic, and that's not overly dramatic. That is just a fact. That federal government has to be able to pass legislation. To pass legislation, it has to be on a bipartisan basis. You have the Congress, the House is controlled by Democrats, the Senate is controlled by Republicans. Unless you get a bipartisan agreement, you're not going to pass legislation. If you don't pass legislation, the federal government does not work. If the federal government doesn't work, it makes it virtually impossible for state governments to work. If I can't work, then local governments can't work. This is not something that a state can control. Well, the governors are in charge, governors are in charge. I can only be in charge to the extent I have the resources and the means. And that comes from the federal government. Not just for New York, but for every state in this country. So that federal government has to work. And the legislation that they pass is important. And they have to pass legislation. And that only happens on a bipartisan basis.
We've been listening to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo give his daily press briefing with the usual statistics. Again, Alicia, the trends continue to be positive, although probably not as quick as we would all like coming down the backside. But the focus today, Lisa, from Andrew Cuomo was really on, kind of defining the central question here as we think about the pace of reopening is what is the value of a human life as you weigh the economic costs of opening up versus the potential health risks in terms of lives lost and hospitalizations and new cases. So really a central philosophical question.
Well, yeah, it sort of goes to the whole angst about the Sweden model, right? The idea that if you allow herd immunity to develop faster, you might have more deaths in the short term, but in the long run, you'll get to some sort of equilibrium where people can reopen business. It's an uncomfortable truth. People don't want to talk about it, and yet that is where we're at. He's saying he doesn't want to make a compromise. He wants to take it slow and make it work. And I guess that the other emphasis here is how much needs to be coordinated on a federal level, right? And how much can be done in a piecemeal kind of way. And I think that really is a debate as the governors and the states really take control at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there has been fiscal stimulus. There needs to be more fiscal stimulus, and a fiscal stimulus from, as per Governor Cuomo today, and we've heard from other governors as well, there really needs to be a significant component in that fiscal stimulus for state and local governments because they're the ones that affect the day-to-day plans and programs, addressing this pandemic and the economic costs and the healthcare costs and so on and so forth. So I think that is certainly one of the pleas that we're hearing from Cuomo. We're hearing from other governors here. There's only so much that they can do without federal resources. So we'll certainly have more of that coming up. Balance of Power with David Weston. He will drive the conversation forward on markets on the pandemic. For my co-host and colleague Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings.
Blagging your way through the kids' schoolwork, pretending you always knew the capital of Brunei is Bandar Seri Begawan, when really you're frantically scrolling through the internet with your phone under the table, hoping that they just think you're an absolute fountain of knowledge. Whatever you rely on the internet for, rely on TalkTalk to stay connected. TalkTalk for everyone.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
A day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our Bloomberg TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. This is where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. And we're going to start once again with the markets this morning. The bulls are out, I think it said, in the equities markets. And we turn now to Abigail Doolittle. A sunny day right now on Wall Street.
It certainly is, and that's a great way to put it. The bulls certainly are out. Because yesterday, of course, we did have a wishy-washy day, and that followed 2 down weeks. But the bulls are trying to take control again. And a piece of this is the fact that we have a very significant rally for oil. So that risk-on tone, that commodity complex trading higher, helping stocks trade higher at this point. And you can see that we also have some great performance for the tech sector. Chips in particular, confirming the risk-on mood. The fact that it is a sunny day out there, David, not just outside here in New York, but also for stocks, is the fact that bonds are lower. So through and through risk-on tone, really kind of breaking through the malaise that we've had more recently.
Okay, so Abigail, let me ask the heretical question, which is the equities know what they're doing. We've got jobs numbers, for example, coming out on Friday that look like they're going to be pretty bleak.
Bleak indeed. Very devastating, in fact, if the consensus for more than 21 million jobs to have been lost in the month of April. And so it's interesting because right now the bulls and the bears, even though the bulls today are taking charge, there's been a little bit of a sideways battle over the last, let's call it 20 trading days or so. There are higher highs, so that tells you that the bulls might have a little bit more strength. But you can see that the S&P 500 over the last 20 days relative to the big rally out of the March lows really hasn't done much net. So the bulls and the bears are both looking for more information. If that report comes in better, and let's hope that it does, than what's expected, that could perhaps help the buyers really break right out of that range. But if for some reason there's color in that report that is even worse than expected, you could see some sort of test of this year's lows. And it certainly seems like there are a lot of folks on the street that are expecting some sort of downside action to come, David. Maybe not on that payrolls report, but at some point.
Okay, Abigail, thank you so very much. That's Abigail Doolittle with a report on the markets. Well, the states, some of the states at least, are starting to open up, although at different times and in different ways. This is something that our next guest has been talking about for some time now. He is Republican Senator Mike Braun from the state of Indiana. So, Senator, thank you so much for joining us today. As I say, you're one of the first ones, at least in my experience, that's saying we should start opening up, but in different ways at different times. Give us a sense of where we are right now. Senator Braun, can you hear me? Senator Mike Braun at the Capitol. Senator Braun, can you hear me, sir?
Back in Indiana, that all started on Friday, effective on Monday. And our state, for instance, is a great example. We've got the Indy metro area, top 15 metro area in the country, basically within a rural state. We got some counties that are impacted by Chicago in the Northwest. We had a few rural counties that got hit hard by Cincinnati. But 92 counties, probably 80 of us were more out in a much different kind of dynamic. Very few cases in my own county, which is a regional center among many other rural counties. They were really ready and roaring to get going here yesterday. So that same kind of dynamic is across the country. And you can also use that analogy state by state. And the real risk, and I never did like the kind of one-size-fits-all, and I was a big believer and listened to the experts on tamping down the disease, but the critical point is going to be how we do this. This is more difficult because we got to stay disciplined, but be very entrepreneurial so that we don't have real supply and demand destruction that makes it tough to recover down the road.
So, Senator Braun, as you say, there's a fair amount of variation within the state of Indiana. I've looked at the map, county by county. As you say, we have Marion County where Indianapolis is. We've got Lake County where Fort Wayne is. There are much more hot spots than other places. Can you really be as granular as to have different rules of opening up county by county? Because people can just move from county to county, can't they? Okay, we're going to come back to Senator Mike Braun of Indiana from Capitol Hill after a break when we figure out some of these technical issues. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Mark it up.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Somebody has a stroke every 5 minutes in the UK. With time, though, courage, and the right support, lives can be rebuilt. Mine was. But with this current crisis, I can't imagine how much harder it must be for the stroke survivor and their family, more isolated and alone than ever. The Stroke Association is working tirelessly to support the NHS and develop new ways to rebuild lives. To find out more or to donate, search Stroke Association now.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistance systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if for whatever reason you become an innocent victim of fraud, they will refund every penny you lost from your TSB account. Find out more about their fraud refund guarantee at tsb.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Pauline. Love may be blind, but it has a new smell.
Pauline, the new fragrance from Euro Millions winner Pauline Hinchcliffe. Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £42 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down, of course, in a used container. And then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from, we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe,
we've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking,
which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help.
Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
That are working on it have been doing everything possible to get them to the market to be used.
Senator Braun, talk to us about the food supply chain, because you have a lot of food provided by Indiana. You also have a Tyson's plant that I think is something of a hotspot as well. Are we concerned about the food supply chain?
So when it comes to food supply and the processing of it, the process is more elbow to elbow than many production lines in regular manufacturing. So it does present a challenge there. But again, when I talk to the people that run these companies, the employees that have to feel secure working there, they've done a lot by putting like plexiglass barriers in between, maybe stretching out the line a little bit. If we would let food security become an issue, it's going to take what has been kind of a dire situation to date and even make it worse. And again, I see the companies that have to deal with this, they're not taking it casually, because again, for the sake and safety of their employees, of their businesses, they know they need to do the right thing. We got to be very careful with food supply, because it's probably the most important component to get through this to where that doesn't get disrupted.
So, Senator, we know President Trump invoked the Defense Production Act with respect to some of those meat plants, those meat processing plants. As I understand it, you think maybe they should also apply to some frozen fruits and vegetables.
I did, because I think processed fruits and vegetables, generally in the canned form, would be the foundation for food banks. And when you really get down to a food supply, that is more transportable. It's probably the basis of, and I thought it needed to be looked at in the same way as poultry and livestock. So I think we just need to pay special attention to that part of our economy. And you got to remember, agriculture was the only stressed sector of the economy going into it. So many of the companies, especially from the farmers and producers up to the processors, maybe didn't have that balance sheet that allows them to get through as easily. Because the farm sector, when we get through this, still is dealing with historically high input costs, low commodity prices, and that reverberates throughout the food chain supply.
As you say, Senator, the farm sector really was under stress and strain long before the pandemic happened. Part of the relief of that was supposed to come with the deal with China, that so-called Phase 1 trade deal with China. Do you have hopes that actually Chinese will end up buying anything close to the amount of food supplies that they had committed to?
That has gotten to be such a complicated subject because of the whole discussion of how they handled it there. They are an authoritarian, some say totalitarian political system. I think that showed its true colors during all of this. I think we've got to find a way for them to reconcile themselves with the rest of the world when it comes to the trade component that it looked like we had just gotten through, and then the coronavirus rose in that country. It could put us into a tailspin similar to the Cold War. I would hope that they learn from this, liberalize maybe some of their political systems so they blend in more with the rest of the world, and a lot of the onus, the burden, is on their shoulders. And hopefully they will learn from this, because the whole dynamic between us and them is not going to go away.
So finally, Senator, you've been a senator for a while now, but you've spent a career really as a businessman. You know the business side of this. Give us your best judgment about how well we could do, best case, coming out of this year. We've heard the president talk about just phenomenal numbers. He may be optimistic on that. Realistically, what can we expect for the economy through the rest of the year?
So I think if we do what I've talked about from floor speeches before we left here, a really smart entrepreneurial restart, into where we take some mitigated risk, because there's so much of what could happen economically we can't see yet, because it would cascade in a way that could swamp it into something tougher than 08 and 09. Since we were the healthiest economy that I've ever seen in the 37 years I was CEO of my own company, we've got the ability to not backslide, pay attention to what we know works, and yes, we could have a really strong resurgence. I don't know that that happens with maybe the speed that the president is looking at, but it'll be closer to what he's looking at than the opposite if we stay kind of hunkered down and don't try to maybe protect the most vulnerable a little better, and then have a smart restart, an entrepreneurial rebirth of the economy. And yes, I think we can see good things sooner rather than later.
Okay, Senator Braun, thank you so much for your time and your patience today with those technical challenges that we had. That is Senator Mike Braun, Republican of Indiana. Coming up a little later in the program, we're going to talk with Mike Froman. He is the vice chairman of MasterCard, about exactly what the pandemic is revealing about some inequalities when it comes to the financial sector. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs, simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker. your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Whether it's another day of market misery, pandemic emergency, or both, one thing will still go right.
We have the latest world and national news.
Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager bring you the most accurate coverage.
The White House is looking for additional ways to support the economy.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
We continue to watch equities around the world.
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. President Trump is on his way to Arizona today, finally getting back out of Washington. Has been eager to do. He's going to visit a plant that's making those N95 masks. We bring in now our Bloomberg political contributor. She's Iona College professor Jeannie Zaino. So, Jeannie, the president's wanted to get back out sort of on the campaign trail. He's going to visit this plant, going to visit with some Native Americans out there. Is this going to change the political race?
Yeah, I think the president and the campaign are feeling some heat at this point. As we look at the numbers, we've seen that, you know, the bump that he enjoyed, brief as it was, has dissipated, and he's a bit underwater in terms of both his approval, in terms of controlling the crisis and overall. So I think we see him really anxious to get out, and it's not a surprise that he's visiting one of the key states, the swing state of Arizona, where recent polls have shown Joe Biden up by 3 or 4 percentage points. And so that, I think, signifies that they really do believe that it is time to get him out there in these swing states and to make sure that he can hold these states.
Such an important point, Jeannie, because as you look at the polling in presidential elections in Arizona, it's been going from decidedly red into sort of a purple area where it's gotten much, much closer in Arizona. At the same time, the president clearly is picking places where he can say, look at some of the good things we're doing on the coronavirus. He's trying to put together his case. But what does he need to do in order to really prevail in November?
Yeah, and we've seen him do that. This latest ad they just put out on Monday, American Comeback, is very triumphant. It talks about, in particular, the return of the economy, and we know that his approval ratings there are much better than his overall approval rating and the crisis ratings. So he really does want to focus on the fact that he is handling this and America is set to come back, as they keep saying. And I think that is what he needs to do. I also think he does need to focus on the crisis itself and the fact that he can be trusted to handle it. He's still below Joe Biden in most of those numbers. And, of course, very important for him is the economy. And it's going to be in these swing states, as the campaign keeps focusing on, not just Arizona, but Wisconsin, your home state of Michigan, and Florida. I think one of the most telling things is that his numbers have dipped a little bit amongst the over 65 group in Florida. If he doesn't do well with that group in these swing states, he could be in danger of winning the election, because, of course, the reason he loses the popular vote but wins the Electoral College is because he overperforms with those groups in these swing states in 2016. Any small dip there is a problem for him.
Yeah, as you say, Jeannie, he has to really establish himself as the one who is competent, who is really handling this crisis very, very well. Is part of that controlling the message coming out as well? And specifically, we see that now they've said basically nobody from the coronavirus task force can go up and answer questions in front of Congress without personal approval of the chief of staff. Is that going to work for them to control that message that much? Remember when Dr. Fauci went up earlier, it caused a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see them really trying to continue what they did, quite frankly, during the impeachment, which seems like so long ago, which is that they are unwilling to go before Congress and answer questions, to hand over materials, because they feel, even though it's a Republican Senate, they do feel that every time they have done that it has come back to haunt them. And so they want to control this message. They don't want their people going before these committees and testifying. And, of course, Congress has a right to be frustrated by that, because their role is to engage in oversight. And, you know, like it or not, the White House is going to have to contend with a lot of oversight in this crisis, not just right now, but as we go forward and the Congress tries to figure out where the executive branch went wrong. This piece in the New York Times today about potentially the White House not being honest about the number of deaths they expect to see is something that they're going to have to answer for, if not to the New York Times and the press, but certainly to Congress at some point.
Yeah, now on that very point, the president addressed that as he went to Joint Base Andrews, actually, and said, wait a second, those data were without mitigation. We're going to have a lot of mitigation. He tried to push back against that. But there's one thing that they can't control, and that's the virus itself. How vulnerable are they to the possibility of a resurgence of the virus as they open up some of these states?
Yeah, they're incredibly vulnerable to that, and that's where they have to be very, very cautious. We know from all the science that that is a distinct possibility. The president is walking this tightrope between being really focused on reopening the economy and getting people back to work, and of course trying to make sure those numbers don't go up. And we're seeing some push. We saw Governor Christie, former Governor Christie, out in the press saying that it's time to accept the fact that there may be a loss of life, that we have to get back to work. The president is sensitive to that. That's the message coming from the right. That's the message coming from many of his supporters like Governor Christie. And at the same time, that loss of life can be very, very problematic for him politically, not to mention in many other ways.
Yeah, it's really a tough choice, no question about it. Thank you so much, Jeannie. Always great to talk with you. That's our political contributor, Jeannie Zaino, who teaches at Iona College. And now it's time for Stock of the Hour. It's going to be Pfizer today because, as I understand it, they have a candidate in the race for a vaccine. And here to tell us all about it is Abigail Doolittle.
They certainly do, David. Pfizer has announced that they are in these experimental vaccine trials with their German partner BioNTech. So we do have the stock popping sharply higher on the day, and you can see that the German shares have done quite well also. And probably what stands out here the most, David, the very aggressive timeline, because it was just 4 months ago or so, even about 3 months from now, where they were in preclinical stages for this vaccine, this experimental vaccine trial. They're saying there's some possibility that there could be some emergency use around this by September. Typically, it takes 10 years for a vaccine to go from the preclinical stage to approved use. It's also very important, though, to see what's actually being promised, the amount that would be available, and the manufacturing amount. But nonetheless, the stock is certainly popping higher. Its best day in almost 3 weeks on these encouraging signs.
So Abigail, unfair question. Why Pfizer? Because there are some other drug companies that also have candidates in the race. I mean, Johnson & Johnson announced one 2-3 weeks ago now. We have other candidates in the race. Why is it Pfizer? Or is this really going around to various drug companies at different times?
Well, it seems that all of these big pharma companies are trying to get a vaccine developed to, really solve, quite frankly, this COVID-19 crisis. Whether or not that happens, because the Ebola vaccine that was created a few years ago, that's the fastest timeline that I'm aware of. That took 5 years. So the idea that it could happen so quickly is, again, a little bit perhaps hard to believe. From a financial standpoint, it won't really represent too much for any of these companies. It's not similar to a big blockbuster drug. They're not going to be able to price it aggressively. But I think that what they're probably looking for is the star power of really solving a problem for this crisis. So you have all these different pharma companies out there trying to come up with a vaccine first. Again, the timeline for all of these companies seems very aggressive, but let's hope that one or more of them does in fact come up with a vaccine sooner rather than later, David.
Yeah, as you say, it would be an awfully good thing for a brand. One last question, Abigail, which is there's also treatment as opposed to vaccine. For example, Gilead with remdesivir.
Right.
Do those stocks get a similar lift when they get some favorable news?
They certainly do, David. It's actually sort of puzzling, the Gilead lift this year. I think that stock is still up more than 20% this year, and last week rallying on the idea that that drug can be used to help. But when it helps, it simply lessens the amount of time that a patient is suffering. I think in that case by 3 days. So that's certainly not a significant treatment or a cure or a vaccine, and it's not something that would change any person's behavior. It doesn't mean if you go out there and you're somehow exposed to the virus that it will change that in any way. But nonetheless, any sort of mention around a drug or a vaccine seems to send some of these medicine, pharma, and biotech companies soaring higher, David.
Yeah, it's pretty understandable. Thank you so much, Abigail Doolittle, for that report on Pfizer, our stock of the hour. Coming up, we talk with the vice chairman of MasterCard. He's Mike Froman about their enormous effort to try to get banking services around the world. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
U.S. stocks are climbing as more economies move toward easing their coronavirus lockdowns, and oil advanced due to a recovery in crude. The Dow is up 400 points, NASDAQ up 180, S&P 500 up 53. Shares of Wayfair rose after investors cheered the company's profitability forecast. The coronavirus pandemic is driving more consumers to shop online. But there's a collapse in the service industries. The Institute of Supply Management's index of business activity, new orders and employment dropped to an 11-year low in April. And airlines are not eligible for federal bailouts if they lay off employees. But once the restrictions lift in October, United Airlines says it's cutting at least 30% of its office jobs. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Messer and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, the pandemic is pointing out some problems we have in our society and our economy. We may have known we had, but boy, it's really emphasizing how bad they are. And one of the areas is in the extreme inequality in terms of financial services available to people. That's something that MasterCard has been working on for some time, and now they are redoubling their efforts. I'm pleased to say we now have the vice chairman of MasterCard, who's also president of economic growth for the company, Mr. Michael Froman. Actually, Ambassador Michael Froman served as trade representative under President Obama. So, Michael, thank you so much for being with us. Give us a sense of what this initiative is. As I say, it's an expansion, as I understand it, of what you have been doing.
Well, that's right, David. Thank you for having me. About 5 years ago, MasterCard committed to bringing 500 million people who had been excluded from the financial system into the system. We achieved that goal last quarter, about 9 months ahead of schedule, and we decided that now more than ever, it's important to make sure people have access to the digital economy. So we doubled down. We've raised that goal now to $1 billion between now and 2025. We've also said it's really important to bring 50 million micro and small businesses into the economy. And because there continues to be a gender gap when it comes to financial inclusion, women tend to lag about 9% behind men in terms of being included. We're going to focus in particularly on reaching 25 million women-owned or women-run businesses around the world.
So, Michael, give us a sense of the geography first. I mean, how many of these are in the United States? How many of there are overseas? Because MasterCard, of course, is a global company.
Well, there are about 1.7 billion people around the world who are still excluded from the financial system. Most of them are in developing countries, but there are people right here in the United States and in Europe who are also excluded, people who are unbanked or underbanked. There are estimates that in the U.S. there's somewhere between 30 and 40 million people who have no formal relationship to the financial system. So a lot of what we're focused on, and it will vary from country to country as it has over the last 5 years, is figuring out how best to reach them. Sometimes it'll be through government disbursement programs. And, for example, millions of people will get their economic payments from the government on one of our cards. Sometimes it'll be working with fintechs who have a capability of bringing people into the financial system that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. Or it'll be partnering with other companies. We have a partnership with a group called Neumann's, which is a big coffee trading group, to help put their workers, for example, in Mexico, on digital payments. And it means that the worker, the grower of the coffee, is getting 20% more for her product than she might have gotten before, because we've eliminated the need to go through middlemen and go through cash.
Michael, you mentioned small businesses as part of this. Give us a sense of what you're seeing with MasterCard, by the extent to which small businesses are drawing down on their credit, as a practical matter, putting it on their credit card, or for that matter, just not buying things at all, maybe with reduced activity.
Well, we're certainly seeing an impact here. People are focusing on essential purchases like groceries and pharmacy purchases. There's a big movement from brick and mortar to e-commerce. But even where there is brick and mortar, where people are going face to face, we're seeing a big rise in what we call contactless payments, about a 40% growth around the world, and people going and just tapping their card because they don't want to hand over their card to somebody. They don't want to handle cash. They don't want to have to put in a PIN number. And so being able to just tap and go is a safe and secure way of making payments. Small businesses, as you said, are particularly hit by this crisis. We've committed $250 million of products and services and financial support over the next 5 years to small and medium-sized businesses to help them digitize, bring them into the e-commerce environment, make sure that their transactions are safe and secure from cyber attack and from fraud. And that's going to be an area of continued focus in the United States and around the world.
Michael, one of the questions we're asking almost all of us right now is, to what extent is this pandemic changing what we're going to be as opposed to just making us get there faster? Talk about the contactless payment. Is that something we were going to get anyway? And to what extent has that really been rushed because of this pandemic?
Well, I think this crisis has underscored just how important digitization is for individuals to be able to transact, to get payments from their government, for small businesses to be able to be in contact with their customers through e-commerce and to do transactions in some form other than cash. So that trend was already underway, but I think this has accelerated it. And certainly in the United States, which had lagged behind a number of other markets when it came to contactless payments, we've seen a dramatic increase in demand for contactless.
One of the things that we've heard a lot about from the major banks, in part, is reserving for possible bad credit, because people are going to have a tougher time paying their credit cards off when they come due, given the fact they're losing their jobs, as a practical matter. What are you seeing at MasterCard, and what adjustments are you making for that?
So, David, I like to say that Apple's not a fruit, Amazon's not a river, and MasterCard is not a credit card company. It's actually the banks who extend loans. We're the infrastructure. We're the technology that makes the payments happen. And one thing that we at MasterCard have been committed to is being a multi-rail company. So we want to help people pay any way they want to pay. Maybe that's on a credit card or a debit card or account to account. Or digitally. So we want to make sure we have now the capability. We're the only global multi-rail company that can help people pay in any way that they want to. And if credit's not appropriate at the moment, then they can rely on debit or account-to-account payments. But we're certainly doing everything we can to help our customers and their customers get through this crisis.
A good lesson. MasterCard's not a credit card company, just like Apple's not a fruit, but you have a vantage point into that entire ecosystem as a practical matter. What actions are you seeing the banks take to try to protect themselves, where it is reducing lines of credit, or how do they confirm actually that their credit card holders still hold a job? Because a lot of them, 30 million or so, have lost them.
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question for the banks in terms of how they're engaging with their consumers. We're making sure that however that evolves, that people can pay, that merchants can get paid for products that they've sold, and are they're enjoying the guarantee that comes with a credit card payment. And so we're making sure that we're trying to make it as smooth as possible as banks and merchants make adjustments through this crisis.
Okay, last question, Michael. I want to draw from your experience as the USTR, the United States Trade Representative, as well as your experience now at MasterCard. Do you have any concern that as people are looking around the world and saying maybe globalization went too far, that maybe some of the borders being put up in some places are not just for immigration, not just for trade, but could be actually for credit and for payment systems?
Well, we do have a concern that people will, countries will sort of resort towards nationalism, nativism, protectionism. Governments have absolutely legitimate interests and concerns about privacy, and wanting to make sure that they've got the best possible financial infrastructure in the country. But one thing that this crisis underscores, for example, is just how important it is that there be really robust systems with cybersecurity protection, with anti-fraud protection, and that you're able to see trends in data across countries so that you can, whether it's the IMF or the World Bank or other institutions, take action to make sure you're addressing those who are most vulnerable. And having a global payment capability, having access to multiple countries allows that to happen. So we're very committed to working with governments through this crisis. We're helping a lot of them, both through our data analytics to understand the impacts of the COVID crisis, and to our payment capability to help them disperse funds to small businesses and to individuals. And we'll continue to work with them as we come out of this crisis to ensure that they've got strong and secure payment systems in each country.
Michael, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. That's Ambassador Michael Froman, Vice Chairman of MasterCard. And now it's time for Bloomberg First Word News. And for that, we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. President Trump says the top U.S. infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, was blocked from testifying to the House on the coronavirus this week because the chamber is controlled by Democrats. Speaking to reporters as he left the White House for Arizona, the president said, quote, "The House is a setup. The House is a bunch of Trump haters," end quote. Last week, the White House said it would be counterproductive for top U.S. medical officials to testify before Congress while they're working to combat the outbreak. In Italy, experts are warning the country's gradual easing of its lockdown will most certainly result in a second wave of coronavirus infections. Health officials are calling for stepped-up efforts to identify possible new victims, monitor symptoms, and trace contacts. More than 4 million Italians went back to work Monday. Italy has had more than 211,000 cases of coronavirus. More than 29,000 people have died in Italy. Hong Kong will soon ease social distancing measures. The city has largely contained the spread of the coronavirus. Hong Kong has agreed to double the limit on public gatherings to 8 people, and schools will resume some classes at the end of the month. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thank you so much, Mark. Coming up on Balance of Power, we talk with the man who now heads for logistics for the city of Los Angeles about how the city is fighting the coronavirus. He is Gene Soroka. He'll be right here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
What began in China?
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Another day inside? I've turned my place into a gymnasium. I'm using the stairs for lunging and the washing machine as a power plate. But if you'd rather shed pounds off your outgoings, take a few minutes to check your bank account for any unwanted direct debits. It's just another small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
Hey y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the
country. Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Sports fans, this is David Jacoby telling you to check out the Chicago Bulls documentary, The Last Dance, as it continues this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN.
Our biggest challenge is us. I am cursed this mentality of competitiveness.
Competition is an addiction. Every game is a battle. Dennis, get up here. And then, immediately after the show, listen to Jalen Jacoby's After Show podcast featuring The Last Dance director, Jason Aaron. Search Jalen and Jacoby to start listening today.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
That there were needs in the broader county as well as the region. So we're working with all folks throughout this great area of Southern California to see how we can make a difference. We're not the answer to everyone's problems right now with inventory, but we think we can put a dent in it. And obviously, the work around what we're doing right now is that we have to help ourselves and we have to move forward to build that LA stockpile that the hospitals can count on, not only now, but into the future. And we see three distinct phases. We're in a triage phase right now where we're trying to get any type of product we can to our medical workers. Second, as we begin to curb this illness over the future months, we're going to have to replenish this inventory. We're ready for that. And then longer term, the medical supply chain is broken. We think we can add value and we can pull people together with both information technology as well as the sheer buying and procurement capacity that the city of Los Angeles holds today.
We hear reports that the state of California is about to start opening up at least some parts of the economy. How does this fit into that plan to reopen the economy in California?
Well, the Port of Los Angeles has been running at about 80% of normal volume thus far in 2020. And the simple difference is that you and I are not out shopping. We're not dining and buying goods outside. California is slowly entering into a phase 2, which would include the opening for curbside and online pickups of florist shops, clothing stores, music stores, and sporting goods outfits. So this will slowly move people in a direction where commerce can begin again. We have plenty of cargo in our warehouses. Southern California boasts the largest warehousing and distribution center construct in the world at more than 1.8 billion square feet. And so today, getting that product out domestically to the interior and our major hubs is front of mind. Cargo flowing through the port has never moved smoother, and we have plenty of capacity on our terminal tarmacs to grow as the economy opens up. And please remember that the Port of Los Angeles moves cargo in and out of each and every one of our 435 congressional districts. So this work will be very important for us to have a line of sight as to what's coming in so we can speed the products through the marketplace.
Yeah, Gene Soroka, he is the Chief Logistics Officer of the City of Los Angeles, and I'm delighted to say he's going to be staying with us for the second hour Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio to talk about exactly what he just was talking about, which is the Port of Los Angeles and how it's doing. That does it for that. I'm sorry, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
Would the medical crisis in any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. IBM is holding its annual digital gathering today, but this year is different. It's different in part because no one will be there. It'll be all virtual. And secondly, they will have 87,000 people participate. Last year, it was 30,000, which may reflect just how dependent we've all become on computers as we work from home. I talked earlier today with Arvind Krishna. He is the CEO. He has been for about a month now of IBM. And I asked him, basically, what are customers really seeking from them in order to make sure all these computers keep working for us?
One of the products we'll announce here is in the category we call AI for IT. And the product is called Watson AI Ops. Outages in IT cost the industry about $265 billion. But that's, if we react after the fact, that cost is still there. If we can begin to predict what may go wrong, and be able to put it right in the workflow, right in all the collaboration tools, and fix it even before it happens, that brings huge power, unlocking the potential of AI for our clients. And that is something we really, really are excited about, in addition to the other hybrid cloud technology we're also bringing out at this conference.
So Arvind, I must say, those of us who are working from home and experience some of the glitches that happen are eager to have those corrected. When will that product be available? Will it really redeem some of the situations that we have where our system goes down? There's some problem, we have to reboot it, things like that.
That product actually is coming out now. We're announcing it at the conference in May, and people can start purchasing it now for deployment in this quarter, meaning before the month of June. So that is a great, great power. But to talk a little bit more on AI, if you look at AI and its impact on COVID, something we're all unfortunately suffering from right now, when I look at medical research in India, I look at government services in Poland, I look at hospitals in the United States, and these examples go across dozens of countries, we can all begin to use intelligent AI assistants to really take away and triage out a lot of information that people are looking for. So in a hospital case, parents who are anxious about their children can interact with the AI assistant and that way you can take 1,000-odd calls and take them out of the medical professionals' hands, allowing the medical professionals to focus on the much more serious cases where the AI reacts with, hey, this is serious enough that you should actually have a person now interact. I think these are really useful examples to show how AI can go, not just in IT, as you pointed out, David, where we all would like all of our infrastructure to stay up all the time, and we do believe the tools in the next month are going to help there, but also in terms of helping our citizens and governments and medical professionals be able to help everyone deal with COVID-19.
So, Arvind, you make a very important point there, mentioning various countries where this could be applied. The situation has been global when it comes to internet and digital. At the same time, even before the pandemic, there were some countries that are trying to draw some borders when it came to data, when it came to some of the internet's issues. Are you concerned? Do you see any indications that the pandemic problems that we're seeing may actually increase the resistance to flows of data and information across borders?
Look, David, I'll sort of begin with my perspective. Of course, economies are always going to, and nations are always going to try to advantage themselves. But when we step back, I think both global trade and the free flow of data have shown that the entire economy, the global economy, gets better and everyone benefits. I think it's a false dilemma when people think about a win-lose. It's not a sports game where it's a win-lose. It's a win-win if you can increase the size of the pie for everyone. Now, I'll acknowledge that should come with regulations, that should come with protections around IP, but the free flow of goods and the free flow of data is what unlocks the potential of all of this for everyone. And if you look right now, actually in the pandemic, I'm encouraged that people are cooperating more. People are taking advantage of both cloud and computing capabilities from everywhere. The sharing of science research has increased. So there are some positive signs amongst all of the emotion that naturally accompanies such a crisis.
That was Arvind Krishna. He is the CEO of IBM, and believe it or not, he will celebrate his 1-month anniversary of being CEO just tomorrow. He's had quite a wild ride with the pandemic. That's going to do it for the TV portion of Balance of Power for today, but there's a second hour over on radio, Bloomberg Radio. Stay with us there, as we're going to continue our discussion with Gene Soroka and talk about the Port of Los Angeles. how it's doing. We'll also talk with the Pennsylvania Attorney General about a new deal with DoorDash to serve the underserved populations of Philadelphia. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Rich Americans are taking advantage of a once-in-a-lifetime chance to transfer money to their children and grandchildren tax-free. It was already easier than ever to avoid the 40% levy on the biggest fortunes thanks to the 2017 Republican tax overhaul that doubled estate and gift tax exemptions to more than $23 million for married couples. But now with key interest rates set by the IRS at all-time lows, 0.8 in May from well above 2% for most of last year, the uber wealthy can loan their heirs or trusts millions with rates locked in for decades without denting that exemption. Online auctions of jewelry are doing well in the pandemic. To wit, a 1930s Cartier Tutti Frutti bracelet hammered at $1.34 million, making it the most expensive piece of jewelry ever sold at an online auction. According to a Sotheby's rep, collectors are bored at home and buying jewels as a sort of pick-me-up. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labour market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand-washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got a rally underway with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all pushing higher on this Tuesday as we await the latest remarks from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. Right now, the S&P is up 47 points, higher by 1.7%. Stocks rallying for a second day. Sentiment getting a lift as more economies, both in the United States and overseas, move toward easing their coronavirus lockdowns. Oil heading for its longest winning streak in 9 months. West Texas Intermediate crude surging 21% right now, $24.69 on WTI. Brent holding above 30, indeed closing on 31 right now, $30.77 for a barrel of Brent. Brent crude up by 13%. I mentioned the S&P up by 1.7%, higher by 47 points, now at 28.89. The Dow surging 331 points, up by 1.4%. NASDAQ up 163 for NASDAQ. That is a gain of 1.9%. 10-year down 3/32 yield right now 0.64%. And with more on the commodities picture, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
The impact of oil production cuts indicate the glut may be beginning to ease. Yesterday, Genscape reported an increase in inventories of only 1.8 million barrels at Cushing, Oklahoma, the delivery point for WTI crude. That would be the smallest weekly gain since mid-March, if confirmed by official data due out tomorrow. And gold is hovering around $1,700 an ounce as more countries move toward easing lockdowns and refineries ramp up production after curbing operations because of the coronavirus pandemic. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
And again, crude oil worth repeating, WTI higher now by 21.3%. Pfizer has administered the first U.S. patients with its experimental vaccine to fight the disease caused by the novel coronavirus, part of a bid to shave years off the typical time it takes to develop a new inoculation. Pfizer up 2.8%. Also today, Regeneron surging. It is up by 5.6%. 102 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are higher. They're not quite as much as U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 1%, and the S&P 500 is up 1.7%. Now, energy companies' ADRs are higher after the price of Europe's benchmark Brent crude rallied above $30 a barrel. Class A ADRs of the UK's Royal Dutch Shell are up 2.4%. BP is up 4%, and France's Total is up 5.8%. And Spanish oil producer Repsol has climbed 9.9%. First quarter earnings beat analyst average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. Repsol maintained its dividend and said it doesn't expect its debt burden to increase this year. Germany's Infineon Technologies has gained 4.9%, and another German company, Bayersdorf, is down 6%, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much. Dave Wilson. Now New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy speaking. His remarks underway. Let's listen in.
By COVID-19. In the wake, in specific, of the tragedy at the Andover Subacute and Rehabilitation Center 1 and 2, I asked the Attorney General to look into the matter and to review all long-term care facilities that have experienced a disproportionate number of deaths. I have asked him to join us today to speak to the task force that he has assembled to lead this charge, as well as to the new online hub through which residents and employees and the families of those working and living in long-term care facilities can submit complaints for further review. Additionally, I've asked Commissioner Persichilli to also speak to her team's ongoing review of our long-term care facilities and to the steps the department has taken to enforce critical safety measures and protocols to protect residents and staff. We know the long-term care issue has been among our biggest challenges, if not the biggest. The data spells out why we need to undertake these efforts. The number of long-term care facilities reporting cases of COVID-19 continues to increase, as you can see, and the number of cases continues to increase along with it. And with great sadness, we've lost too many lives of long-term care facility residents to COVID-19. Roughly about half of all of our COVID-19 deaths statewide have been of individuals who had been within the long-term care system. And just as tragically, we have seen some in the industry be slow to respond and adapt to the emergent threat of COVID-19, and we intend to hold folks accountable as we should and as you would want us to. As I've said before, we know this is an issue not unique to New Jersey. It is truly a national issue. And while we know there are many good actors who will do all they can to protect their residents and staff, unfortunately, we also know that there are bad actors in this industry. We hope the solutions we find here in New Jersey can be a national model for mitigation, protection, and resiliency, whether it be for COVID-19 or a future pandemic. Before I get to today's numbers, I also want to briefly address the new guidance we received yesterday from Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and his team regarding how we can use the $2.4 billion in CARES Act funding that New Jersey has received. As you may recall, it's a total of $3.4 billion, but there's up to $2.4 billion that can go directly to the state. The balance goes to the counties. I've had multiple direct and frank conversations on this from President Trump to Secretary Mnuchin and others in the administration. We received yesterday from Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and his team regarding how we can use the $2.4 billion in CARES Act. Frank conversations on this from President Trump to Secretary Mnuchin and others in the administration, along with in Congress, Leader Chuck Schumer and Speaker Nancy Pelosi, on the need for us to have greater flexibility in the use of these funds to meet our emergent needs. And I am pleased to announce that we have received greater flexibility in how we can use this money, which means that more of it will stay here in New Jersey to backstop our efforts against COVID-19. I am grateful for the spirit of cooperation with which the administration and specifically Secretary Mnuchin and his team has taken these discussions and for their willingness to listen to our concerns. While this new guidance doesn't get us all the way to where we want or frankly need to be, I'm grateful that we now have greater room to meet some of our immediate needs. We will put this money to good use for our first responders and our small businesses. And because of this guidance, we'll be able to fill an immediate need to provide the funding we had budgeted for our schools and educators. I can say today with confidence that because of the new federal flexibility, we will be able to make the next school aid payment of $467 million, which will go out on Friday. This is a well-deserved recognition that education and educators are a critical part of our COVID-19 response. This guidance is a win for them, a win for the 1.4 million students and their families, and a win for our property taxpayers. But to be clear, we are not out of the woods yet. This funding was already accounted for in our cash flow planning. We just didn't know if Congress would let us use it. We still have a long way to go, and some of the previously announced restrictions on our ability to maximize this funding remain. We not only need full flexibility to use our CARES Act funding to cover the escalating costs of this war, and it is a war, but also billions in direct federal cash assistance to stave off the economic and financial catastrophe that is threatening not just New Jersey, but every American state. We need Congress to step up in a big way to provide direct relief to the states, to help cover the immense revenue shortfalls that are a result of our having to close our economies, a step, by the way, that none of us wanted to do, but that we had to do to save American lives. It doesn't matter, frankly, if your state is large or small, urban or rural, led by a Democrat or a Republican. This need is universal. And again, I call on Congress to pass a package of direct state relief so we can ensure that once we restart our economy and are on the road to recovery, we could stay on that road. But obviously, to get on that road, we need the data to know that we're in a position to be there. So with that said, let's review the overnight numbers. Today, we're announcing an additional 2,494 positive test results for a statewide total of 130,593. However, as Judy and Ed would want me to say, we still have some, as we've said before, some lagging results from the past several days. And I believe, without putting words in either of your mouths, we probably need to smooth over Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at least. And as we look to the trend of new cases, we are hopeful that once all are counted, we'll see the trend lines moving downward. However, the map, which we show often, of New Jersey continues to show slowing rates of doubling of new cases, and this is a good thing. Stay with this if you could. For those of you watching at home, I'm not sure you can see this, but there are now a majority of counties where the virus is taking at least 30 days to double. That's a big deal. And the only counties that are still in the darker orange are in the south, with smaller number of cases where the virus is newer. So the steepness of that curve, while we want to see it flatten, obviously, is not surprising. So this map is going in the right direction. Please God, it continues to. As of 10 p.m. last evening, 5,328 patients with COVID-19 were being treated in our hospitals. This is a very small increase from Sunday, but still represents a decrease of nearly 3,000 over the past 3 weeks. And remember, there was at one point in our very worst case scenario, Judy, it wasn't that long ago, that we were fearing 36,000 potential hospitalizations. We have avoided the worst of it by a lot, and that's thanks to everybody out there. Let's keep at it, because our vigilance is working, it's paying off, and it needs to continue to pay off. And as we see the number of hospitalizations across our health systems regionally continues to trend in the right direction. And again, north, central, south, the south had seen over the past, I guess about now 7 to 10 days ago, that upswing which we were expecting. We expected the virus to migrate north, central to south. We saw that. Thank God the numbers have remained low. And furthermore, there's a flattening. There's not only a decrease in the northern and central curves, there's a meaningful flattening in the south curve. Our field medical stations reported 35 patients last night, with a total of 400 having been treated. So while hospitalizations had a small increase, the number of patients reported in either critical or intensive care dropped, and Judy's been reminding us this is a big one for us to look at, to 1,534. So we have now had 1 full week of declining numbers. Ventilator use currently stands at 1,169, and this number too continues to decline. There were 385 new hospitalizations yesterday. I'll come back to that. And on discharges, 232 live patients were released from our hospitals yesterday. Let's stay with this for a second. I know there's a lot of folks out there who think that this is some recipe out of a cookbook, that there's some magic wand, that there's some magic date, that this is somehow a two-dimensional reality we're dealing with. It is at least three-dimensional, folks. There's no magic wand. There's no recipe other than we know social distancing is the most important thing we can do. And just remember, if you're one of the folks out there, as I am, by the way, itching to get things back open again, 385 people entered the hospital yesterday in New Jersey with COVID-19. 385 people entered the hospital in the past 24 hours with COVID-19. Please God, most of them, I hope all of them, get out of there. But sadly, the data tells us they will not in their entirety. So with all due respect, on Memorial Day weekend, I'm sorry about schools being remote for the rest of the years, particularly the high school seniors and their parents. I'm sorry we can't give you more definitive guidance yet on things that we're working on. By the way, non-essential retail, I hear morning, noon, and night. I appreciate all that. I appreciate all the inputs and the wisdom on beaches. We still have people getting sick, going to the hospital, and sadly, over 300 today, we're reporting in a minute, have died. So with all due respect, this is the fight of our lives. It's not two-dimensional. It's at least three-dimensional. We are considering data. We're considering perspectives. We're trying to learn from other places in the country, in the world. We're taking the best advice we can from medical experts. We're trying to make every decision based on the data, the science, and the facts. Nobody is itching more to get this state back up and running than yours truly and the team up here. But we gotta do it right. We gotta do it responsibly. We gotta do it safely. And we are committed to that, whether you like that or not. Okay, our hospitals are continuing to show positive trends. And as I've said several times already, just to repeat the point, data determines dates. These are the numbers that will tell us when we are in position to get on the road back and toward the responsible restart of our economy. So let's keep focused on the task ahead, pushing these numbers down further. That means keeping up, folks, with the great work you've done on social distancing, wearing a face covering when in public. We think increasingly these things, or the kerchiefs or the handkerchiefs, they really actually make a difference. And doing all the other seemingly little things like washing hands regularly with soap and water that can make, even though they're little steps, they can make a huge difference. Remember, public health creates economic health, and data determines dates. No state has flattened the curve as mightily as New Jersey. Hats off to each and every single one of you. Keep it up. This is in your hands, our hands, to keep doing that, and the extent to which we can do that. That gives us the public health that we need. the metrics that we're looking for. That gives us the data that we need to then say, you know what, we can responsibly not just open up state and county parks and have golf again in New Jersey as we did responsibly last weekend. Let's keep that up, but we could take other steps. But we'll do that together based on the science, based on the facts. Unfortunately, as I mentioned a minute ago, with great sadness, we continue losing members of our New Jersey family, and today we report that we've lost 334 more.
We've been listening to Governor Phil Murphy of the state of New Jersey in his daily news conference, and he eventually did get to the numbers that he gives every day about the number of increased cases, the number of increased hospitalizations, and then, very, very sadly, the number of deaths. But he started out by saying that he's been negotiating, particularly with the Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, for more flexibility on $2.4 billion of CARES money, that's under the statute passed by Congress, and that there had been a lot of restrictions on. He said they got some of them modified, not as many as he thinks are necessary, but that will allow them to use some of the funds for school payments. So that is Governor Phil Murphy of the state of New Jersey. And now let's turn from New Jersey to the larger question of U.S. trade. U.S. trade numbers for March came out today, and they showed a sharp increase in the trade deficit, largely driven by exports, which fell 10%. Still with us is Gene Soroka, who not only is the Chief Logistics Officer for the City of Los Angeles, but also continues as Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles. And thank you so much for your patience in waiting for us, Gene. Give us a sense. You were starting to go to this in the first hour of Balance of Power. Let's talk about exactly what we're seeing in the Port of LA right now with respect to trade.
Thanks, David. With respect to trade, we've been hit twice by both the trade policies out of Washington and now COVID-19 and the worldwide economic slowdown. Both are going to take a lot of time to repair, if at all, on the trade side. But right now, in year 2020, we're seeing about 80% of the normal cargo volume that we would through April of this year.
So, Gene, I'm curious about that because last time we were on together, it was before the pandemic, and I thought you were anticipating maybe a 20 or even 25% drop as you got into the second quarter. Does that mean that the pandemic didn't affect it that much beyond what the trade policy was?
No, it was both, David. And you're correct in the last time we visited in New York. Fourth quarter 2019, we saw volume drop at the Port of Los Angeles by 16.5%. As we entered the first quarter of this year, when I was in New York, third week of February, I thought we'd probably see a 15% dip. It turned out to be about 18.5% first quarter this year. So we're running at about 20% of normal, and it's a combination of both. But really weighing heavily on us right now is the lack of demand by the U.S. consumer. And that's simply because you and I are not out shopping, dining, or otherwise going outside to purchase goods. And we're seeing that in the orders of fast fashion organizations, retailers, and the like. Their orders are either being postponed, delayed, or canceled at this juncture. We've sped through spring fashion. We now have a look that's a little fuzzy around what back to school may or may not be. And then the order cycle will begin to take us towards those year-end holidays pretty quickly coming up.
So what is coming through the Port of Los Angeles? I mean, as you say, we're not having fast fashion and things like that, but at the same time, you're at something like 80% of where you were. So as a practical matter, what is the goods and material coming in and out of the Port of Los Angeles?
Our big box retailers are still strong. So the stores that have remained open through COVID-19 and the emergency orders that have come down federally at the state and local levels, folks are still shopping at those moderately priced, high-volume stores. That's very important to us. We also see a certain level of electronics coming through, furniture, that are all mixed into those outlets as well. Individually, we've seen dips in the automotive market, specifically as car sales are estimated to be down 27 percentage points this year. And on the export side, we're still seeing some semblance of recyclables, agriculture, and heavy-duty machinery, but not to the levels that we normally would.
What is going on with inventories here in the United States? Are inventories building up as people import things but they can't sell them?
Yes. And this is where there may be one small silver lining in this trade policy, is that because of the tariffs, we saw a lot of folks advance their inventories before tariff milestones in 2018 and 19. We were able to build up inventories. In the first quarter of this year and fourth quarter alike of 2019, when we saw shipments dip, we saw a drawdown of those inventory levels at our warehousing complexes.
Now we start to see a little bit more of a buildup. So as the consumer goes back out and as the economy slowly opens up at the local, state, and national level, we'll have products available to speed to market.
Gene, is there any way at all for you to project out into the third and fourth quarter at this point, or is it simply an unknown?
It's pretty difficult, but what I would say is this. Some of the experts on the economic side are telling me we'll start to see a little bit more of an opening in economic purchase power first quarter of 2021. If that's the case, we will see modest upticks in cargo moving through the Port of Los Angeles in Q4, meaning October, November, December, to help plan for that. But it's still a little bit early to give you a specific number.
Gene, give us a sense of employment by the Port of Los Angeles, about the Teamsters that are working there, the truck drivers and the heavy machine operators. How many people do you employ? How many are still on the job?
1 in 9 jobs in Southern California. More than 1 million people go to work every day with jobs related to this port complex when business is normal. Today, less cargo means fewer jobs. And as we look out at the longshore numbers of shift work, we're down about 17% year on year and 19% compared to the 3-year average of the number of folks who are out on our docks working. With 80% of the volume coming through, it's about a 20% dip in pure truck moves that happen on the terminals every day.
And how vulnerable are those workers to the coronavirus themselves?
Well, the truck drivers get paid by every move they make, so they are right in the line of sight. We've got to continue to rebuild this economy, and we think we are a jobs multiplier as well. So we're continuing with more than $360 million of infrastructure and construction projects, even through cycle. And the work there also means that we've employed about 3,000 construction workers consistently on the job. And that will open us up as well, because once we get back into some semblance of a line of sight on how much cargo is coming in, that'll mean we can bring more people back to work on the truck and longshore side as well. But the safety of workers is always front of mind, and that's whether it be the correct PPE, the face coverings, the gloves, the distance that each guy and lady must be apart when they're working on the tarmac, to the cleaning solutions we've provided. All of that is very important to us as we continue to look at how that worker must go to the job every day.
Gene, really appreciate all your time with us today. It's really good talking with you, as always. That's Gene Soroka of the Port of Los Angeles, and also now the City of Los Angeles, because Chief Logistics Officer. And now it's time for a market check, and for that, of course, we go to Charlie Pellet.
And I thank you very much, David Weston. Happy Tuesday, by the way. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all advancing, with the S&P up now by 45 points. That is a gain of about 1.6%. We've got the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It is pushing higher now by 320 points, a gain there of roughly 1.4%, while the NASDAQ Composite Index also rallying up now by 1.8%, up 158 points. NASDAQ now at 88.69. Do want to begin with crude oil. Another big move there. Any other day, this would be a huge story. WTI up by 19%, now with a 24 handle, 24.34. Brent is above $30 a barrel. Brent crude now at $30.55, up now by 12.3%. Again, big story, one we're monitoring for you here at Bloomberg Radio. Sentiment getting a lift as more economies move toward easing their coronavirus lockdowns. We've got the 10-year yield 0.64%. Gold up $1.90 the ounce, higher by 0.1%. 17.04 right now on gold. After the bell, we will be hearing from the Walt Disney Company, among many other earnings reports. Disney shares are down now by 1.2%. Recapping, equities rally, S&P up 43 points, up 1.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. There's hope that manufacturing may help drive the economic recovery, but a recent survey of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, which includes key companies like John Deere and Caterpillar, didn't find much optimism. To take us through the state of the industry, we welcome now Kip Eideberg. He is Senior Vice President of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. So, Mr. Eideberg, thank you so much for being with us. Take us through your survey and what you found.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, David. So the survey that, as you mentioned, was of 105 CEOs of leading equipment manufacturers. That includes small, medium, large, and multinational ones, and really covering the cross-section of our industry. So we're talking agriculture, construction, mining, utilities, and forestry. And what we found is that the two primary challenges right now for our industry is plummeting demand and stressed supply chains. And that is really what is driving the outlook for the industry over the next 30 days. And about 30% of those CEOs said that they plan to lower their financial outlook by more than 30% over the next 30 days. And 6 out of 10, 60%, said that they plan to lower it by as much as 30% over the rest of the year.
So did you get any sense about a longer-term time horizon? Can they look out beyond 30 days and say 60, 90, 120 days?
Well, I think it depends, and it depends partly on how quickly the economy will open up again, and it depends partly on what Congress will do to help the industry. We believe, and again, this was an interesting finding from the survey, the vast majority of CEOs said that the number one thing that Congress can do right now to help equipment manufacturers to make a significant investment in our infrastructure. That will help the demand for equipment, and it will also help drive the economic recovery. So if Congress can step up, put policy above politics and make that investment, that will certainly help. But I got to tell you, beyond that, we're looking at some pretty tough days ahead for our industry, and particularly for those smaller and medium-sized manufacturers.
So there's been talk about infrastructure for some time, certainly since President Trump came to office, even before that. Not much action. There's talk again about that. But isn't there a lag on that? I mean, if Congress did get together and decide to have an infrastructure bill tomorrow, how long would it be before that really turned into business for your members?
Well, that's a great question, David, and obviously I think a lot of your listeners will remember the debate about shovel-ready projects a few years ago and whether they were truly shovel-ready. And obviously, the machinery that is our government takes a while to start to move, right? And that is something that we all have to be realistic about when it comes to large investments, whether it's infrastructure or other sectors. But I think first and foremost, it will provide certainty for our industry. So when they look, at the next 30, 60, 90 days, knowing that demand is going to grow certainly helps. One of the things that Congress can do in the short term is to reauthorize the Surface Transportation Program. That's set to expire by the end of September. That's the funding mechanism that funds investment in roads and bridges. So if they can get that reauthorized, I think that would provide immediate certainty. But then obviously it's equally important that state and local government get ready so that they are in a position to spend this money as quickly as possible, because as you pointed out, it does us no good and does the economy no good if Congress authorizes a lot of money and then it takes 60 days, 90 days, more likely, a couple of years before that money's put to use.
You mentioned, obviously, the big issue is demand. There's just not the demand there right now. We've destroyed a lot of demand because of what we did in response to the pandemic. What about supply chain? Are your members concerned that even when the demand comes back, there may be real and perhaps even lasting disruptions to the supply chain?
Yeah, we are very concerned about supply chains. And looking at the survey again, 70% of those CEOs said that they have experienced a negative impact on their supply chains. And going back to what your previous guest said, equipment manufacturers were experiencing some fairly severe difficulties even before the COVID-19 pandemic as it relates to trade and supply chains. Protracted trade war with China, retaliatory tariffs, all had a negative impact on our industry. And so COVID-19 turned a pretty bad situation into a more dire situation. So that is a concern. Obviously, we've had some positive news from some parts of the world. Some Chinese factories are up and running. We're starting to see others come online in parts of Europe. But until we can address the supply chain issues, both here in the United States and globally, it's going to have a negative impact on our industry, and it's going to take it some time before things get back to normal, no doubt.
And finally, I'm mindful that Friday we have non-farm payrolls numbers, jobs numbers coming out for the United States. Give us a sense of employment among the members in your organization. How many people still have their jobs? How many people have lost them?
Well, the good news is that the vast majority of equipment manufacturers have stayed open and on the job during this pandemic. We were designated as essential very early on, and not just our members, but our suppliers and our distributors. So far we have not seen, and I think partly because we've been designated essential, we have not seen, the furloughs and the layoffs that other industries have seen. But as demand continues to go down, as supply chains continue to be more and more stressed, and with the economy being what it is, we expect the situation to get worse here in the next 30, 60, 90 days, as the survey indicates. So right now what we need, and I think an important point here is often overlooked, is the Paycheck Protection Program and what that has was intended to do. We have a lot of small and medium-sized members who are running out of time and cash. And if Congress can't step up and support them, I think you're going to start seeing more furloughs, more layoffs in the days ahead.
That's a good point. It's not all the John Deeres and the Caterpillars. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your being with us today. That is Kip Eideberg of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. And now let's check in on an equity market that seems to be doing pretty well. We go to Charlie Pellet.
Absolutely right about that, David Weston. You'll be talking about it on Wall Street Week. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing right now, with the S&P up 48 points at 2891. That is a gain of 1.7%. We've got the Dow up 352 points, up 1.5%. NASDAQ up 170. That's a gain there of 2%. Stocks rallying for a second day. Sentiment getting a lift as more economies move toward easing their coronavirus lockdowns. That optimism extended to crude oil. Major story, going to be talking about that a lot today. West Texas Intermediate now at $24.26 a barrel, up 19% right now, surging $3.86 a barrel. Brent back above $30 a barrel, $30.47. That is a gain right now of just about 12%. 10-year down 5/30 seconds. The yield there 0.64%. Gold higher by 0.1%, 17.04 the ounce. Again, let's repeat the equity numbers. S&P up 49, a gain there of 1.7%. A Bloomberg exclusive. We sat down with Arvind Krishna. He's the CEO of IBM. He talked about a number of topics, including the sharing of data across international borders.
And if you look right now, actually in the pandemic, I'm encouraged that people are cooperating more. People are taking advantage of both cloud and computing capabilities from everywhere. The sharing of science research has increased. So there are some positive signs amongst all of the emotion that naturally accompanies such a crisis.
And IBM today launched new artificial intelligence and cloud computing products. The IBM shares up right now by 1.5%. So again, recapping, a Wall Street rally underway. S&P up 48, a gain there of 1.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That, David Weston, is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. We're going to shift gears now for just a moment. You may not have noticed, but today is Cinco de Mayo, which conjures up thoughts of tacos and guacamole and maybe even some margaritas, which underscores the extent to which whatever the pandemic has meant for immigration for now, the longer-term history of the United States is interwoven with other cultures from around the world. We welcome now Fred Hochberg. He's former chairman and CEO of the Export-Import Bank under President Obama and author of the book, Trade is Not a Four-Letter Word. So, Fred, thanks so much for being with us. You're the one who flagged this for me. We should think about Cinco de Mayo and what it means for our relationships with the world.
Well, Cinco de Mayo, first of all, is much more an American celebrated holiday than in Mexico. I was in Mexico researching my book, and it's really not a holiday that is celebrated in quite the same way. But it brought to mind how so much of the food we eat, starting with the taco bowl, we rely on imports and trade to enjoy that taco bowl everywhere in this country on May 5th. Whether you're in Alaska or Washington or California, we get the avocados mostly from Mexico. We get corn, believe it or not, from Romania, Turkey, and the Netherlands. A lot of our meat still comes from places like Australia and New Zealand. So the story of this holiday and enjoying, and I had a delicious taco for lunch today, is a story about trade as much as anything.
Well, it raises a question, though, Fred. As you described that, are we going to be able to continue to enjoy that in the time of the coronavirus?
Well, I mean, when we think right now about the meat plants, pork-producing plants that are being shut down because of widespread contagion of workers in those plants, we should be happy that we also have another source of supply, that we don't have one source of supply, that we also import beef, import pork, and other products to balance when there's a a short-term problem in our country or in our own supply chains. So the odd thing about this COVID-19 crisis that we're enduring is all of a sudden we seem to understand what a supply chain is. When we don't see toilet paper or beef in our supermarket, we say, wait a second, what's the holdup here? So maybe we begin to understand we're all interconnected. And to try and go it alone is not a really good way of doing anything.
But is there something in between going it alone and being totally interconnected, which is really managing those supply chains very carefully for security and for assurance? I mean, already there are a lot of people who are saying, how do we get to a world where so much of our personal protective equipment was coming from China? That's not a resilient supply chain. We need, as I keep hearing it called, resilient supply chains.
You're absolutely right, David. I mean, for a long time, we only heard the word national security. Now we hear things like food security, energy security, and we're probably going to be talking about health security, to making sure that those supply chains are resilient, are strong enough, that they're diversified enough, that we're not going to be relying on too much coming from one country or one region of the world if there is a tsunami or a flood or a hurricane, or in this case, a pandemic. So I think that it's going to require all of us to rethink how we live our lives and, frankly, how companies do business to make sure that they can operate under very different conditions. You know, we're seeing other restaurants. As I said, I ordered a taco bowl delivered today. I would have gone out normally and had a taco bowl on Cinco de Mayo, but today I ordered it in and helping keep new local restaurants in business.
Is diversification, geographical diversification, going to be enough? Or will there be a press, certainly in some products, in some areas, to say some of it, some significant part, has to be domestic?
I think so. I mean, if you think about energy, you know, after the oil shock in the mid-'70s, when we had the energy crisis, that spurred two things in our country, in my opinion. A greater reliance, a greater exploration of renewable energy, and also what energy sources we can have in our own country, which include natural gas and fracking and the fact that we're one of the largest oil producers in the world. That may make, some people may see that as a negative, but my point was we adapted as a result of that crisis. And I think we're going to have to adapt as a result of this crisis in terms of making sure that we have security, whether it be our food supply or our health and personal protective equipment. All of that, I think, is going to get rethought.
We're seeing possible I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It needs to be rethought.
Yeah. We're seeing potentially some adaptation right now on two fronts in U.S. trade. One is in U.S.-China trade, where we heard the president say, once again, maybe we should have some more tariffs because they didn't handle the coronavirus the proper way. On the other hand, we started today negotiations with Great Britain, with the United Kingdom, for a possible trade agreement. Take us through that. How much in jeopardy is the already fragile trade relations with China, and how much opportunity is there with the U.K.?
Well, with China, you know, this administration, the Trump administration, sees China as an enemy and is wanting to enter into a Cold War. And the problem with Cold Wars, they sometimes turn hot and with a lot of unintended consequences. So, but there seems no moving this administration off more of a collision course and a more belligerent stance with China. And I think, frankly, there's that old expression, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and the Trump administration is not going to waste this crisis on finding ways to batter China and to try and bludgeon them into being more compliant. So most other administrations have taking a tough stand is not synonymous with taking a belligerent stand. You know, we need to be tough. We need to go toe-to-toe with China, but that doesn't mean we have to be belligerent.
And what about...
Switching to the UK.
Yeah, UK. What about the UK?
UK, I mean, we have to... Part of it has to see what happens with Brexit, from my understanding, is because until the UK is actually fulfilled or outside of the EU, it'd be very hard to enter into an actual trade agreement with them. But, you know, President Trump was very successful in the USMCA in terms of the kind of support we saw in the House and the Senate. It isn't as clear that provides a real blueprint for future trade agreements. There were so many unique qualities around USMCA, United States Mexican Canadian Agreement, the old NAFTA, that I'm not sure that we should just assume, oh, we did that, we can just do another trade deal, 1, 2, 3. I think this still will be more complicated and not that simple to execute.
And finally, briefly, if you can, Fred, what about your old job, Ex-Im Bank? What about U.S. exports, which are down substantially today, just on the numbers? What can we do to get those going again?
Well, the United States Export-Import Bank provides financing for U.S. exports. And by the way, 90% of the companies when I was there were small businesses. That is going to be more vital than ever because, at least under President Obama, 2/3 of the exports we finance were in the emerging economy, the developing economy. And so that's where the financing is needed. So I hope that the Ex-Im Bank gets turbocharged.
They'll need it more than ever. Thanks so much to Fred Hochberg. He is the former head of the Ex-Im Bank. Coming up, Pennsylvania is teaming up with DoorDash to protect its drivers, but also to serve the needy. We're going to talk with the Pennsylvania Attorney General. He is Josh Shapiro. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.